Lady Exquisite, can you tell which of the city's items are Geno treasures? Han Sen asked Exquisite. Exquisite shook her head. No, but I can see something you cannot. Han Sen observed the anvil for a while, then he began to walk on down the street. Are you going to give up without even trying? Exquisite asked coldly when she caught up to Han Sen. I bet that countless people from Sky Palace have already tried to take that anvil. I was standing there for a while, and the looks that the blacksmith was giving me weren't very friendly. I would rather go somewhere else where the reception is not so uninviting, Han Sen said as he looked around. As Han Sen was checking out the city, the civilians in the city checked him out in return. The city wasn't big, and there weren't many people. They all lived there, so they knew each other well. Non-natives stood out quite a bit there. Plus, the people in that city were looking at Han Sen with hostile eyes. There was nothing warm or inviting about them. Han Sen could understand their attitude. In the past, Sky Palace students must have performed quite a few scams to steal their goods. These people certainly wouldn't enjoy outsiders coming in just to make off with their things. Yun Chongkong hadn't been willing to divulge the specifics of the Black King City to him. It was probably because Sky Palace students had done many things in that city that no one would be proud of. The people of that old city didn't like outsiders, but they weren't picking any fights. They only walked around Han Sen with cold stares. It was likely they had been taken advantage of before. The students of Sky Palace had their power restricted in the city, but they still had their physical strength. Ordinary creatures couldn't stand against power like that. If it wasn't for Black King City's rules, any Sky Palace student could bring down the entire city with their fists. No wonder Bo Chin said it was harder to get something in Black King City these days. Han Sen shook his head with a wry smile. He wasn't very good at talking, and his ability to communicate with others was below average. He didn't think he would gain much from this city. Now that he didn't have access to his powers, he was unable to tell which item was a treasure and which was just a normal item. He could only rely on his gut instincts and eyesight. Han Sen tried to summon a beast soul, but beast souls were restricted as well. He couldn't bring anything out of his sea of soul. That stopped his cheating mind in its tracks. Lady Exquisite, do you know what race the people here belong to? Why do they look like crystallizers? Han Sen said as he walked. After a moment of thought, Exquisite said, this is just their appearance. They aren't true crystallizers. They aren't like any race in this entire universe, actually. They are just creatures of the Black King City. They can't leave this place. They must spend their entire lives inside this city. Are the creatures in the other 4 cities similar to these? After Han Sen asked that, a strange feeling whelmed him. He was from Sky Palace, but he was asking an outsider about what might be members of his own species. Exquisite didn't seem to give Han Sen's question much thought. She shook her head and said, each of the 5 cities is different. The inhabitants all have special traits and quirks. The other cities aren't as safe as Black King City. Even deifieds can die in them with a little bad luck. Han Sen and Exquisite continued to walk and talk, sightseeing their way through the city. The grass, the wood, the bricks, and the slate of the region looked very old and heavy. Han Sen felt as if he was walking through the streets of a vintage film. Everything there looked like treasures, but they weren't. It sucks not having my ability to sense things, Han Sen sighed. But he suddenly remembered he had crystallizer glasses. He didn't know if the crystallizer technology would work in the city, so he gave it a try. Han Sen put the glasses on his face and looked at the people in the city. Data scrolled across the lenses. Target locked, analyzing data. The voice of glasses sounded in Han Sen's ears. The data continued to flash across the lenses. Why are you wearing glasses? Exquisite felt as if what Han Sen was doing was rather weird. She looked at the glasses. Glasses wasn't a treasure, so Exquisite wasn't surprised by his ability to put them on. These people don't like us. Wearing glasses to hide our faces might help us steal items. They won't be able to immediately recognize me if I wear these, Han Sen explained. When she heard Han Sen say that, Exquisite looked at the people and said, you think too much. Anyone who takes an item from this place will be branded a threat, and they will never be able to come back. Han Sen laughed and didn't respond. He continued walking. Not long later, Glasses had results ready for him. Target: at 6, type mutant genes. Male. Calculated gene age: 34. Gene level? None. Gene potential? None. What is an AT6 type mutant gene? Han Sen asked the glasses in shock. That indicates that it is a creature. The number 6 means it is from the 6th branch of creatures, Glasses answered. What does that mean? Han Sen tried to ask it. At is at. The AI of the glasses had the maturity of a 6-year-old. She was unable to answer Han Sen's questions. Are they related to the crystallizers in any way? Han Sen changed his approach with his questions. No, Glasses answered hastily. Han Sen asked her about a few other races that looked similar, but Glasses refuted each suggestion. Can I see what other creatures might exist? Han Sen asked, not willing to give up yet. Information incomplete. Cannot answer, Glasses answered. Since he couldn't get any more information out of Glasses, Han Sen put his mind on the city. Glasses could be used, but she could only scan creatures. She didn't scan treasures, and so Han Sen would have to depend on his luck for any decisions he made on that prospect. If you follow me to the very high, I can tell you where a deified treasure lies and how to claim it for yourself, Exquisite said as two of them walked around the streets. Han Sen was coming up empty-handed thus far. Where is a deified treasure? Han Sen asked her quickly. Exquisite had been tricked by Han Sen once before. She looked at him silently, not willing to answer his question. Han Sen couldn't trick her into giving him more information, so he shrugged and said, but you should at least tell me what sort of treasure it is. The city is very small. If I told you what it is, you would find it. Exquisite rolled her eyes. Han Sen was surprised. It was rare to see her express that much emotion. Never mind, then. After a moment of thought, Han Sen decided to return to the blacksmith's smithy. Sky Palace had controlled Black King City for many years. All the best stuff had probably been taken by this point. Even if there was something good left to get, it would be either extremely difficult to claim or impossible to find. So far, the anvil was the only thing Han Sen had seen that interested him. And so, that was what he was going to try to claim. Motherf ****. If you don't get lost, I'm going to clobber you to death with my hammer. The blacksmith spoke the common tongue with a heavy accent. He swung his hammer wildly as he ordered Han Sen out of his shop. After Han Sen got tossed out of the smithy, a bucket full of water followed him out, drenching him. His fox ears flopped downward when they were wet, and the sight made Exquisite laugh. Han Sen noticed the smile on Exquisite's face, and he said, "You should smile more. You look much better like that." Exquisite's smile quickly vanished, and she returned to looking like a statue once again. At this point, most of the populace of Black King City is like the blacksmith you just met. Taking a treasure from here might be a little harder than it used to be. You should think about my offer. If you come with me to the very high, I can guarantee you at least one deified treasure, Exquisite said emotionlessly. Han Sen started to wipe away the water beaded across his face. He walked back over to the same blacksmith and asked if the man was willing to sell the anvil. The well-muscled blacksmith threw another bucket of water at Han Sen and swung his hammer. Han Sen narrowly evaded the strike. Han Sen wasn't angered by this, though. If someone had tried to lay claim to his treasures, he probably would have behaved the same way. He might have done far worse, in fact. Han Sen walked around Black King City and came up with nothing. When nighttime came, Han Sen had to depart Black King City. Everyone had told him that Black King City wasn't dangerous as long as he followed the rules, but that was only true during the day. If he and Exquisite remained in Black King City at night, they would probably end up dead. A long time ago, when White Jing was first discovered, a few students had spent the night in Black King City. The next day, they were nowhere to be found. They had vanished. A deified investigator was sent after them, but he disappeared as well. Ever since then, students had been forbidden from staying overnight in Black King City. They had to leave before the sun descended past the horizon. Han Sen walked away empty-handed. Exquisite didn't seem upset to have found nothing, but she hadn't gone there for treasure, anyway. She was happy moseying around with Han Sen. After that first trip, Han Sen wasn't very interested in returning to Black King City. He preferred to spend his time studying the Geno arts that appeared in the 7th Tower. He made no plans to go to Black King City again. Han Sen had been studying those texts for a while now, but their volume and variety were impressive. There was a new text every day, and there was never a duplicate. There was always something new available for him to study. The words on the books were like the king geese on the king tree's leaves in the Extreme King. Han Sen had never seen the symbols before in his life, but for some reason, he could still understand what they meant. However, if he copied the texts down, the meaning would be lost. It was a strange sort of magic. A year passed. It was the calmest year of Han Sen's life. He read books, he healed, and his body started to recover. Occasionally, he even went to Black King City. There was no fighting there. There was no bloodshed. Han Sen felt as if he had become quite the lazy boy. After that year of recovery was done, his damaged body was halfway healed. He read all the books in the 7th tower. What annoyed Han Sen was that the effects of the charming god's Jian were becoming stronger. It was changing more aspects of Han Sen's body. His appearance didn't change much. He still had his fox-like ears and tail, but the rest of him was human. However, Han Sen could feel that something was changing within his eyes. He didn't know how to describe it. He wasn't trying to be flirtatious, but when he met people's eyes, especially women's, they would feel as if he was hitting on them. When he spoke with the Yun sisters, Yun Suyi would blush and hang her head low for the longest time whenever he happened to glance at her. Yun Susang didn't have much of a reaction, but she rarely visited him now. If this keeps going on, people are going to think I'm some player who is unfaithful to his true love. Han Sen found the situation to be incredibly disheartening. Women didn't seem to want to get close to him anymore. Not even Exquisite. Are you the charming god's Jian or the repulsive god's Jian? If this keeps going on, aside from my wife, no woman will be willing to talk to me. Han Sen lifted the charming god's Jian and shook it a little as he lectured it. Fortunately, Han Sen wasn't very worried about the opinions of women. That made the weird changes a little easier to deal with. Han Sen was bored at home one day, so he decided to return to Black King City. Big Brother Bull, how goes the blacksmithing today? Han Sen went to the smithy and smiled at the blacksmith. None of your god *Ned business, grunted the blacksmith that Han Sen had called a bull. Tell me when you want to sell that anvil of yours, yeah? We can talk about the price, Han Sen said with a smile. He wasn't put off by the harsh welcome. Maybe in your next lifetime, the bull man said. Over the course of that year, Han Sen had gone to the smithy every few days. He wasn't in a rush to get the anvil. He just wanted to forge a good bond with the people of the city. It would be great if he could get his hands on a piece of treasure, but he wouldn't be upset if he didn't. His trips to the city had become a sort of vacation. In the beginning, the people despised Han Sen and shied away from him. After his repeated trips, however, the people got used to seeing him around. Although they were still wary of his motives, they didn't scurry away from him as they once had. The blacksmith bull man even spoke to him occasionally. Although the man was grumpy whenever he spoke, a conversation was a conversation. Like usual, Han Sen began to meander through the city. Han Sen knew the place like the back of his hand, but he hadn't found anything valuable within it. The legends claimed that when Black King City was first discovered, there were treasures everywhere. Even a random brick might contain untold power. But there were too many people in Sky Palace, and over the years, all of the city's treasures had been plundered. The items that remained, like the anvil, would be very difficult to take away. Brother Han, come over here. Han Sen was walking down the street when a wooden door near him suddenly opened. A 30-year-old woman with a bun on her head appeared in the doorway wearing a flower dress. She waved at him quickly. Han Sen recognized her. She was the daughter-in-law of the Liu family. She hadn't been married for long when her husband died, and she had been single ever since. Everyone referred to her as the Liu widow. You need something? Han Sen stepped over toward her. He carefully kept his ears from pricking up. He had once heard a story about the Liu widow's house containing a treasure. Many of Sky Palace's students had wanted to claim the Liu family's treasure for themselves, but none of them had been successful. Han Sen knew that the Liu widow was the only remaining member. Perhaps he would be able to buy that treasure now. As soon as Han Sen walked inside, the Liu widow slammed the door shut with great force. She leaped onto Han Sen with wolf-like hunger in her eyes, and she clung to him lecherously, her arms wrapped around him like an octopus. Woman, what are you doing? The Liu widow was leaning down to kiss him, so Han Sen used his hands to stop the descent of her lips. I want you. Don't you want the Liu family's treasure? If you can love me like I want you to, I will give you anything you want. Liu Widow was staring at him like a wolf in heat. No, she was more like a horny vixen. Han Sen planted his hands on her waist and picked the Liu Widow up. He walked toward the yard and threw her down on a stone desk. Her arms and legs spread out across the desk. The Liu Widow closed her eyes. Her face was red and she panted swiftly as she said, "Don't be gentle with me just because I'm a delicate woman." But after impatiently waiting for it to happen, nothing actually did. When she opened her eyes again, Han Sen had vanished from the yard. After Han Sen left the Liu Widow's house, he power-walked down Black King City streets. But he felt as if something was wrong. The women all across Black King City cast strange glances his way. Their eyes seemed bold and hungry whenever they glanced at him. Even the eyes of shy, young girls looked like they were on fire whenever they looked at Han Sen. This is wrong. Something is very wrong. Is this what the charming God Jian's power is all about? Han Sen decided to leave Black King City. After he left, he saw Yun Susheng riding her crane. Yun Susheng's expression twisted strangely when she noticed Han's senator. It seemed as if she wanted to avoid him, but at the same time, she was wrestling with the desperate desire to stay and see him. "Susheng, can I ask you something?" Han Sen walked toward her and bowed. "What is it?" Yun Susheng's eyes darted around as she spoke. "Has the charming God's Jian worked its magic on me? This is very important for me to know. Can you tell me how much I've changed?" Han Sen said with seriousness. Yun Susheng was shocked, and then she blushed. After hesitating for a while, she nodded. She nibbled her lips as she said, "It seems very serious. You should ask someone else." After that, Yun Susheng hurriedly departed. Han Sen called her back, but she ignored him. Han Sen knew this was very bad. After he went to the little Jade Island, he had Bubble take on his form and remain there, pretending to be him. With Bubble covering his absence, he decided to teleport to his home in the Alliance. "Yanran, is there anything off about me?" Han Sen asked. He was lying on the bed with Ji Yanran curled in his arms like a cat. Ji Yanran's body felt soft as she held Han's senator with a look of satisfaction. She said, "I don't see a problem. You look very good. You look a lot more charming than you did before." "What do you mean by charming?" Han Sen asked quickly, his eyes flashing with worry. Ji Yanran looked at him closely. She held his chin as she stared at Han Sen's face. After a while, she trailed a finger down his jaw and said, "It makes me want to sleep with you more." "Oh no. So that's what's happening." Han Sen sank back on the bed in frustration. Now he knew why Yun Susheng was avoiding him and why Exquisite no longer visited him. It wasn't because they thought he was a playboy. It was because they couldn't resist doing something that was utterly forbidden. It would be something that couldn't be described. That was why people were avoiding him. What kind of F*** race weapon is this? It's like a mating pill. Han Sen wanted to cry. He wasn't doing as bad as Ningyu, but this was bad in an entirely different way. It was good to be popular with women, but Han Sen didn't want to be a tool for women to enjoy. "Honey, how about we do it again since the sun hasn't yet risen?" Ji Yanran suggested, an obsessive glint in her eyes. She kept drawing circles on Han Sen's chest. "I can't do it. I need to sort out this issue with the charming God's Jian." When Han Sen was finally back on his little Jade Island, his legs still felt a little weak. Han Sen couldn't figure out a way to fix this situation, so he went to Sky Palace and asked Sky Palace Leader for his assistance. Sky Palace Leader seemed to know about Han Sen's problem. After Han Sen explained, Sky Palace Leader smiled at him and said, "Isn't this a really good thing? It's a great skill for producing offspring. Your genes are so talented. You should definitely make a few more babies." Han Sen looked bitter and said, "I don't need help in that department. Plus, if men start to," Han Sen trailed off. Sky Palace Leader laughed out loud and said, "Don't worry. The charming God's Jian only works on the opposite sex. If you were a woman, having the charming God's Jian would only make you attractive to men. Leader, is there no way to get rid of this side effect?" Han Sen wasn't in the mood to joke around. Sky Palace Leader kept smiling as he said, "If you were an elite that could control the power of the charming God's Jian, this wouldn't happen. The problem is that your power isn't sufficient to control the charming God's Jian, and thus, you are powerless to resist its effects. That is why you're so plagued by women that you came moaning to me." After a moment of silence, Sky Palace leader went on to say, "As for a solution to this problem, there is one. You need to find a true god elite to seal up the charming god's Jian. Do that, and it will no longer affect you. However, once that is done, you will no longer be able to use the power of the charming god's Jian." "You think I can find a true god elite to help me?" Han Sen quickly asked. He didn't need the power of the charming god's Jian. "It will be difficult. I can help you if you take some time to think about it. But hiring a scary elite like that would probably be expensive." Sky Palace leader looked troubled. "I will cough up any sum I need to for this to be fixed." Han Sen gnashed his teeth. He didn't want to be a walking sex toy. He would pay whatever fee was required. "How about this? You spend 3 days teaching out of every month. And then, I will help you find a true god deified." Sky Palace leader made it sound like a complicated process, judging from the way he spoke. "No problem," Han Sen agreed instantly. He wasn't in the mood to bargain right now. There was no other way he might be able to find a true god elite to help him. He had to rely on the leader. "You must consider this. If the charming god's Jian is sealed, unless you become strong enough to break that seal, you will never again be able to use its power." Sky Palace leader smiled warningly at Han Sen. "I don't need it. I don't need it to find women," Han Sen said, clearly not caring. "It isn't that simple. If you have the charming god's Jian at your disposal, women are more likely to approve of you. Even if you wanted their money and their lives, at some point, they would give whatever you asked to you without a shadow of a doubt. You can use it in Black King City. You will get a lot out of it. If you seal it, that will no longer be an option. Leader, please find a true god elite to help me seal it." Han Sen had a wry smile. Han Sen wanted those treasures, but he wasn't willing to sell his body for them. "Fine. Give me the charming god's Jian," Sky Palace leader said. "This thing will come back to me by its own will," Han Sen said with a depressed look. "Wait until you find a true god elite. I will give it to him. He is already in front of you. What are you waiting for?" Sky Palace leader said in annoyance. "You are true god class?" Han Sen looked at the man in shock. He remembered that Sky Palace leader had been a king when he competed in the Geno being scroll 100 years ago. In such a short period of time, he had already become a true god. "You do know exceptional geniuses can hide their talents, don't you? Sky like me are adept at doing that." Sky Palace leader smiled. Sky Palace leader said it would take a few days to finish his preparations of sealing the charming god's Jian. Han Sen agreed to leave the weapon with him in the meantime. He was the leader of Sky Palace, so it was unlikely that he'd be greedy enough to steal the charming god's Jian for himself. Even if he did steal it, though, Han Sen wouldn't mind. As long as the weapon no longer plagued him with women or returned to him when he tried to get rid of it, he wouldn't mind anything that would get the item away from him. If it can be sealed, I wonder if I can ask Sky Palace leader to seal Ning Yu's little green sword as well, Han Sen thought to himself. But Ning Yu's situation was vastly different from Han Sen's. After the power of the charming god's Jian was sealed, it wouldn't have any effect on Han Sen's power. Han Sen had his super god spirit body. He could remove any abnormal changes that tried to debilitate him. He could get rid of his ears and tail, but Ning Yu's super god body didn't do anything like that. He was forever bound to be a weak, little woman. The little green sword had affected her leveling. Ning Yu had become lazy, and without the little green sword's power, she might never level up again. Back on the little Jade Island, Han Sen waited a couple more days. The charming god's Jian had yet to return, which made him feel quite relieved. Han Sen didn't go anywhere for a few more days. He just remained on his little Jade Island, waiting. On the 4th day, a Sky Palace guard requested that Han Sen pay a visit to the leader in his garden. Han Sen was to receive his charming god's Jian again. But when Han Sen saw the weapon this time, there was a layer of rust on it. The engravings that once adorned it were no longer visible. No one would believe that this rusted chunk of metal was a race weapon. The sealing is complete. Unless someone forcibly removes the seal, the Jian should no longer affect you, and you will no longer be able to make use of its power, Sky Palace leader said in a toneless voice. "Thank you, leader," Han Sen happily proclaimed. I have to remind you that you'll spend 3 days every month teaching, Sky Palace leader smiled. Han Sen left the garden without mentioning Ning Yu's little green sword. If people learned that Ning Yu had a race weapon, a lot of greedy eyes would be directed toward her. Ning Yu wasn't strong enough to repel others from taking her little green sword, so Han Sen thought it would be best to forego that idea. Back on the little Jade Island, Han Sen used his Dongxian Sutra to push his self-cogwheel and enter the core hall. In the hall, he used his super god spirit body to remove his fox ears and tail. Ah, that feels better. Han Sen touched his head and felt nothing that didn't belong there. He let out a sigh of relief. He entered the core area under his dollar persona. This was his first time using his dollar identity to enter the core area this year. Han Sen looked around. He didn't see the small crocodile god or the bronze furnace. It has been a whole year. I wonder if they have traveled away from here. While Han Sen had been under the effects of the charming god's Jian, he hadn't wanted to enter the core area as dollar. He'd been afraid that someone would figure out that he was Han Sen. Han Sen considered where he should go for a minute, then he took off. He hadn't been flying for long when he saw Li Qier coming toward him. Exquisite was accompanying her. Dollar, you're here? Li Qier looked surprised. She quickly hurried to Han Sen's side. She had waited a whole year to see Dollar again. It had been a painful time for her. If she had known how long it would take, she wouldn't have gone to all the trouble. This might be another encounter of fate. It's hard to believe we've run into each other yet again, Han Sen said. Fate? I've been waiting here for you for a whole year. Li Qier rolled her eyes. What? Han Sen asked with surprise. Li Qier hesitated, but she had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let this chance slip by again. If Dollar left again, she had no clue how long she would have to wait next time. To be perfectly honest with you, I am a very high student. My people are recruiting. I hope you can come with me to the very high. Our people can provide many resources and geno-arts to make you deified. You'd only have to work for me for 4 years, Li Qier said, speaking loudly and clearly. She wanted to make sure that this chance didn't go to waste. Han Sen was stunned. He hadn't realized that Li Qier wanted to take him to the very high, too. I am sorry, but I'm afraid I must disappoint you. I hate being restricted. I would rather end my life than be contractually bound to anyone or anything. Han Sen had never had any interest in going to the very high. He certainly wouldn't change his mind on Li Qier's account. Li Qier was shocked. She couldn't believe Han Sen had rejected her offer without even thinking it over. Please think about it. This isn't a bad deal for you. My race will provide you with deified resources, Li Qier pleaded. After spending this long on Dollar, she wouldn't give up easily. Exquisite looked at Han Sen with surprise. She thought she was unlucky, having 2 guys reject her. She couldn't believe Li Qier was experiencing the same thing. I'm really sorry. I would prefer to remain your friend, and nothing more. Han Sen tried to soften the blow of his abrupt rejection. Li Qier understood Han Sen's line of thinking, but she just shook her head and said nothing. She was disappointed. Anyone who had waited a whole year for that result would be quite upset. Did you two see the small crocodile god and bronze furnace? Han Sen asked, quickly moving on from their previous conversation. They should be in that system. Li Qier pointed in a specific direction for Han Sen, and then hastily departed the core area with Exquisite. She was extremely disappointed. Third sister, have we been too quiet for too long? Have the other races forgotten how powerful the very high are? Li Qier looked at Exquisite with sadness. Exquisite shook her head. Special people just aren't willing to simply hand themselves and their fate over to others. If you really want Dollar to be your silkworm, you'll need patience. After that, Exquisite started to think about Han. Senator Exquisite had grown very troubled lately. She wanted to get closer to Han Sen and establish some sort of a bond with him. That way, she hoped Han Sen would accept her offer and become her silkworm. But not even she was able to resist the power of the charming god's Jian. So, every time she saw Han Sen, her mind would flood with all kinds of naughty ideas. She worried about acting those out every time she laid eyes on him. Third sister, you seem different. Is Han Sen really so special that he has made you change your tone? Li Qier looked at Exquisite with wide eyes. She had never imagined that Exquisite would talk about potential silkworms like this. It made Li Qier interested in who Han Sen was. Everyone has some kind of flaw, Even the very skilled, Exquisite mumbled. She didn't even know what she was feeling. Likir looked at Exquisite. Her third sister had been acting rather strange lately. What kind of man is Han Sen? How can he make third sister forget her very high forget love? Likir asked with confusion. Han Sen didn't know what Likir and Exquisite were talking about. He continued to fly. When he saw the bronze furnace, he was given a fright. The bronze furnace was as big as a castle. There had to be tens of millions of weapons inside its blazing fire. God knew how many resources it had gained by following the small crocodile god. It had forged countless weapons. How do I get these two guys out of the core area? Han Sen wondered as he flew behind the small crocodile god and bronze furnace. They looked as if they could kill God himself and take down Buddha as well if he happened to wander by. If any other xenogeneics got a whiff of them, the terrified creatures would run away as fast as they could. This made Han Sen so happy. The bronze furnace was getting closer to becoming deified, and the small crocodile god was already very powerful. If he could take them out of the core area, their powers would be very useful. Over the past year, Han Sen had read through a lot of info regarding the core area. Much of it was classified documents that Sky Palace had compiled. Even so, Han Sen had yet to learn how to bring a core xenogeneic out of the core area. Unless he killed them and took their core genes, it would be impossible to bring them out. The small crocodile god wasn't happy that Han Sen had been gone for so long. After it saw him, it began to roar at Han Sen as if it was chewing him out. "Look at this," Han Sen said. He brought out a reconciliation item he had prepared beforehand. It was a pair of sunglasses that was tailored for a crocodile. The small crocodile was instantly fascinated by the gift of sunglasses. It looked at them with keen curiosity, and it quickly forgot all about telling him off. Han Sen put the sunglasses on the small crocodile god. Fortunately, it had grown up quite a bit. They weren't too big, and Han Sen was able to put them on the face of the small crocodile god with ease. Cool. Han Sen looked at the crocodile god, complete with its sunglasses, and gave it a thumbs up. The small crocodile god looked like a gangster boss now. It had become very intimidating. But the sunglasses also hid the creature's tiny, beady eyes, which made the small crocodile god much easier to approach. The small crocodile god seemed to approve of the sunglasses. It looked very cocky with its sunglasses on, and it kept its head tilted up as if it knew how cool it was. Han Sen wanted to use the small crocodile god's power to kill deified xenogeneics, but he didn't know where to begin searching for them. The bronze furnace led the way forward for half the day, but they were only able to find one king-class core xenogeneic. They were unable to locate any deified xenogeneics. Without any deified xenogeneics to kill, Han Sen wasn't in the mood to carry on. He found an opportunity when the small crocodile god wasn't looking to slip out of the core area. But as Han Sen stepped through the core hall door, the small crocodile god appeared. It jumped onto his back. Han Sen reacted too late to stop it from happening, and he was already firmly inside the core hall. Han Sen thought that the powers of the core hall would keep the small crocodile god from entering. However, when he looked back, he saw that the small crocodile god was still on his shoulder. They were inside the core hall together. The small crocodile god roared at Han Sen in rage. It seemed to be saying that Han Sen was despicable and that he was betraying his promises by running away again. Han Sen didn't pay any attention to the crocodile's objections. He lowered it from his shoulders and spoke to himself, thinking, "No way. Core xenogeneics shouldn't be allowed to enter the core hall." This sort of situation had never transpired in countless eons. But now, the small crocodile god just jumped in easily? Was it because of the crystallizer modifications it was subjected to? Han Sen wasn't sure why the small crocodile was able to enter the core hall, but he didn't question it. This was an excellent development. Han Sen held his breath as he looked at the small crocodile god, hoping that he could return to the Geno universe with it still in tow. It worked, and that made Han Sen leap for joy. The small crocodile was in Han Sen's room. It looked around, intrigued. It was curious about everything it saw. "I am rich. I can bring creatures out of the core area. This little guy is a deified xenogeneic with a 9-star potential. It could become a true god." Han Sen was extremely excited, but as he thought about it some more, he became worried. He had been Dollar when he met the small crocodile god. He had just brought the small crocodile god to Sky Palace, and if Exquisite saw it, she would realize that he was Dollar. No, I can't let the small crocodile god stay here. Ignoring the small crocodile god's objections, Han Sen tossed him back into the core area. The small crocodile god roared at him from the core area. It was clearly upset that Han Sen had sent it back. Han Sen tried comforting it a little, and he promised that he would bring the small crocodile god out one day. When the small crocodile god finally came into the Geno universe, it would receive many gifts. That was the only way Han Sen could get the creature to calm down. Han Sen tried to bring the bronze furnace into the core hall as well, but it immediately bounced out. So far, the small crocodile god was the only being that could follow him out. It seems as if the small crocodile god can only follow me out of the core area because of the crystallizer modification tests, Han Sen thought to himself. He didn't know where the small crocodile god could be safely kept if he was brought through to the Geno universe. Han Sen couldn't keep the creature in Sky Palace. It couldn't stay anywhere that connected to Han Senator. He tried to think of a place that it could stay for a while, but he came up empty. Allowing the small crocodile god to wander across the universe would be a waste of a personal fighter, and Han Sen would fear for its safety. The universe was a more savage place than the core area. Although the small crocodile god was like a ruler in the core area, in the larger Geno universe, there were still plenty of xenogeneics that would be able to kill it. Han Sen didn't have any good options at the moment, so he went back to Sky Palace alone. Han Sen planned on going to his old stomping grounds on Planet Eclipse. Maybe he could contact his little uncle and Xie Qing King to see if they had a place for the small crocodile god. But before he could leave his little jade island, he saw Lone Bamboo coming his way. Han Sen, your wounds should be healed by now, yes? Lone Bamboo asked Han Sen. I'm around 80 or 90% healed, Han Sen answered. That is good enough for me. I'm going to White King City to hunt xenogeneics. Let's go together, Lone Bamboo said. White King City? I don't have a pass for entry. Each of the 5 cities required a specific pass. They couldn't use one city's pass to enter another. Han Sen only had the pass that granted him access to Black King City, so he couldn't enter any of the other 4 cities. Lone Bamboo lobbed a pass to Han Sen and said, Now you have one. Fine. But you should at least tell me what goes on in White King City, Han Sen said, as he caught the spell and shrugged. Let's talk while we walk, Lone Bamboo said as he started moving in the direction of the White Jade Jing. Han Sen followed, and Lone Bamboo began to explain White King City. It was different from Black King City. White King City had xenogeneics that were king class and above. There were even deified creatures that roamed there. But the xenogeneics that occupied that place were unusual. They were different from the wild xenogeneics that could be found elsewhere. After Lone Bamboo explained White King City to him, Han Sen's eyes brightened. What you're saying is that White King City is like a giant arena, and you need to kill the xenogeneics in an arena to earn their eggs? Han Sen asked with a look of disbelief. It is something like that, yes? If your power is sufficient, you can kill a deified xenogeneic and take the creature's eggs, Lone Bamboo confirmed with a nod. There is a place that good around here? You should have told me sooner. Han Sen was so happy. It took an unusual person to be able to see the 12 towers and 5 cities. That was especially true of the 5 cities. Only the people that could see them were allowed to enter. Han Sen followed Lone Bamboo into White King City. It was different from Black King City. White King City was a giant, circular construct that sort of resembled an amphitheater in Rome. After the two entered, Han Sen realized that it really was a large arena. Banks of seats surrounded the circular fighting pit. Currently, there wasn't a soul other than the 2 of them in the entire arena. There wasn't even a single creature. I thought there were xenogeneics here. Why is there nobody here? Han Sen asked, glancing around the empty stadium. He couldn't detect the presence of anything living. The creatures that were here most recently have all been killed, and new ones have not appeared yet. Wait a little bit. They will be here soon, Lone Bamboo said. He moved to sit down on a flight of stairs. Han Sen followed him and sat down. They waited together for something to happen. Not much later, Han Sen heard the sound of chains being rattled. He looked toward the arena. The gate leading into the arena began to rise, clanking its way into the air. When the gate opened, Passage to and from White King City was closed off. Are we not allowed to leave? Han Sen asked. White King City hosts deathmatches. Only when one team is destroyed will the match end. If you want to leave here, you will have no choice but to kill the xenogeneics that oppose you, Lone Bamboo said. But we don't know what creature will be coming to face us. What if it is deified? Han Sen asked. That's why I brought you with me, Lone Bamboo said with a hearty chuckle. Oh, D*MN. You tricked me. Han Sen looked at the arena's gate, hoping that whatever creature emerged wouldn't be deified. The gate rose, revealing the entrance to a dark tunnel. He couldn't see into that darkness, but he could hear the approaching footsteps. Shortly after, something came into view. It was a creature clad in silver armor. Its hands clutched a thin, silver sword. From the eye slit in the creature's helmet, a sinister red light glowed. It looks like our luck is not too shabby, Lone Bamboo laughed. You call this not too shabby? Han Sen could see the monster clearly. A silver substance chain glinted faintly around the armored creature. It was a deified xenogeneic. Primitive deified xenogeneic silver destroyer. Based on the reading of the god spirit touch, this xenogeneic has 8 armor talents. If we can collect its xenogeneic egg, perhaps we can raise it to larva class, Lone Bamboo said. Han Sen's smile looked a little strained. Aren't we gambling with our lives here? What if this xenogeneic is already at the transmutation or larva class already? We'd be dead for sure. The sky claimed the white jade Jing a very long time ago, Lone Bamboo said calmly. We have conducted a great deal of research on White King City. Sky Chance's department has calculated that around 80% of the xenogeneics here are king class. 10% of them are half deified. Less than 10% is deified. Plus, it is an even lower chance that you encounter a deified of a higher class. That is why I said we were so lucky. There was a very low chance of going up against a foe such as this. This is precisely what I wanted. As Lone Bamboo spoke, the silver destroyer reached the center of the arena. From there, it looked in their direction. Before Han Sen could react, the silver destroyer raised the short sword in its hands. It thrust the blade toward Han Sen, and its silver substance chains shot from the sword like needles. There are 2 people here. Why is it going after me first? Am I that unlucky? That thought remained firmly in Han Sen's mind, but it did him little good. He had to act. Pang! The silver sword light hit Han Sen, and his body exploded. At the same moment, another Han Sen appeared in a different portion of the arena. He was holding his 6-core snake bow. He drew the bow, knocking a jade light to the string. He let go, firing the arrow toward the silver destroyer. Lone Bamboo then joined Han Sen in the arena. His jade sword glowed with a sword light as he slashed at the silver destroyer. The silver destroyer swung its silver sword twice. Han Sen's arrow and Lone Bamboo's sword lights were suddenly shattered. They hadn't even gotten close to their enemy. The silver destroyer's substance chains didn't seem to have a wide area of control, so Han Sen and Lone Bamboo kept moving as they fought. They sprinted around White King City to avoid the attacks that came after them, continually searching for a way to counterattack. What the hell? His sword's moving a lot faster now, Han Sen thought. He wasn't able to dodge the next strike. A silver sword light flashed right by his face, drawing a line of blood across his cheek. He felt it as the blow grated against his cheekbone. Its substance chains seemed to rely on speed to maintain their power, Lone Bamboo said, as he unleashed another sword light. But the silver destroyer swung its sword and broke that one too. Ha! Han Sen used his other hand to draw a ghost teeth knife. He summoned a knife light and weaved a web of silks across the sky. He prepared to draw them down upon the silver destroyer. But Silver Destroyer continued to swing its small silver sword wildly, destroying any semblance of a knife's silk net before it could even form. That surprised Han Sen a great deal. So fast. Even with his excellent vision, he couldn't see how the Silver Destroyer was dispatching his silk web so fast. Lone Bamboo shouted. The third eye upon his forehead opened. His pupils turned a purple red, splitting into shapes that looked like cherry blossoms. Han Sen remembered that Lone Bamboo's sky eye should have been plain red. When Han Sen had seen the man's third eye before, it carried an intimidatingly murderous aura. That third eye was a thing of the past, though. Lone Bamboo had changed. And now Han Sen understood. Lone Bamboo's third eye had changed because he became one with the body of the purple-eye butterfly. For butterfly wings spread majestically from Lone Bamboo's back. His sky eye released a purple and red beam that looked like a substance chain. Han Sen was familiar with that beam. It should have been a purple-eye godlight that could restrain others, but when Han Sen brushed against that beam with his senses, it felt more dangerous and violent. It was different from the evil eye Han Sen had seen before. The purple and red beam landed upon the Silver Destroyer. The Silver Destroyer swung its sword in a vain bid to break the godlight, but the godlight wasn't solid. The silver sword light hit the godlight with pinpoint accuracy, but Lone Bamboo's destructive beam flew on anyway, completely unimpeded. The moment the godlight touched its body, the Silver Destroyer seemed to freeze. It stood where it was, unmoving. Its sword hovered in mid-swing. With a grin, Han Sen drew the 6-core snake bow, took aim, and fired at the Silver Destroyer. But the Silver Destroyer was moving again before Han Sen's arrow even found its target. The creature's small silver sword cut the arrow in half. The godlight restraints don't last for long. We need to cooperate and time our strikes, Lone Bamboo said with a frown. Lone Bamboo, if you knew it was a deified xenogeneic with an 8 armor talent, why do you not know anything else about it? The creature had just managed to slash Han Sen's back with a silver sword light. Han Sen's spine was visible through the gaping wound, so it warranted a complaint. Didn't you see the 8 words on the gate? That means it has an 8 armor talent, Lone Bamboo said as he kept running. It works like that then, does it? Those words describe whatever creature emerges? But surely, someone can't be breeding and growing the xenogeneics in here, right? Han Sen pondered aloud as he surveyed the area. He turned his gaze toward the gate with 8 words carved into it. The text was from an ancient language of the Geno universe. I don't know. Even the Sky Elders that discovered this place never figured out the White Jing's origin. And so, no one knows where any of these xenogeneics come from, Lone Bamboo said, as he continued to fight the fiend and fall back whenever necessary. The two of them fought well together, but the Silver Destroyer was simply too fast. Han Sen tried to predict his enemy's movements, but the creature's attacks were so quick that they were unavoidable, so Han Sen's predictive abilities were of limited use. Many silver sword lights lit up the skies of White King City like lightning. By the time Han Sen saw these sword lights and tried to dodge, it would already be too late. Every time he committed to an attack, he would be unable to dodge. Lone Bamboo wasn't faring much better than Han Senator. He was accumulating wounds, as well. The most depressing thing about this entire situation was the fact that Lone Bamboo's purple godlight, aside from the first time he used it, was unable to land a hit on the Silver Destroyer. The creature moved faster than light itself, and whenever Lone Bamboo fired out some of his killer light, the Silver Destroyer was already gone. None of their Geno arts could land a strike on the Silver Destroyer, and even the ones that came close were broken by their foe's sword light. Han Sen was starting to miss the presence of Little Uncle, especially when the Silver Destroyer's sword light went through his hand. Han Sen groaned in pain and mumbled to himself, "Little Uncle is good at getting hit. I don't know where he is now, but it would be great if he was here." Seeing that he was about to get hit again, he couldn't take it anymore. He summoned his Peacock King soul robe. Rainbow substance chains gathered up around to wreathe around the feather garment. Han Sen's 6-core snake bow fired an arrow bursting with rainbow light. He had aimed it at the incoming sword light. Pang! The arrow of rainbow light was destroyed by the silver sword light, and the impact melted half of the silver sword light. The remaining half of the attack continued on toward Han Sen, unaffected. With the power buff of the Peacock King's soul robe propelling him forward, Han Sen flitted from side to side like some strange bird. With his increased speed, he was able to finally dodge the Silver Destroyer's silver sword light. That is some scary speed. Now that he was using his Peacock King soul robe, Han Sen was moving at deified velocities. It still wasn't quite enough to put him on par with the Silver Destroyer's rate of attack, though. He had to use his abilities of judgment and movement to successfully evade the sword light. That's it. If you keep doing this for a while, I'll find a chance eventually. Lone Bamboo kept trying to shoot the Silver Destroyer with the purple eye godlight. Seriously? You want to keep using me as bait for this monster? Why don't you give it a try? Han Sen grumbled, but he still tried his best to lead the Silver Destroyer around. The Silver Destroyer was stronger than any xenogeneic in the core area. Han Sen used his Peacock King's soul robe and the 6-core snake bow to harass his enemy, but he did little to fight the Silver Destroyer directly. The creature was simply too fast for Han Sen to hurt it. If he fired an arrow at close range, the creature's sword would effortlessly slash the projectile out of the air. Even the space-traveling arrows with Drillhead were unable to hit his foe. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo were double-teaming the Silver Destroyer, yet the monster clearly still had an advantage over them both. Han Sen was doing well, though. Now that he had summoned his Peacock King Soul Robe, he was able to block the enemy's sword light. Lone Bamboo's wounds, however, kept increasing. Han Sen tried his best to lead the Silver Destroyer around the arena. More than anything, he wanted to stop it from dealing more damage to Lone Bamboo. Although Han Sen and Lone Bamboo were working together to take down the Silver Destroyer, their cooperation was far from flawless. Their powers and thought processes were different, and on an instinctual level, they didn't approach the fight in exactly the same manner. Because of this, they missed more than a few chances. Ningyu is very good at helping others coordinate. If he was here to be our commander, it would save us a lot of trouble. It is a shame. When Han Sen thought of Ningyu and the state that the man was currently in, it left him shaking his head. As the fight went on, Han Sen and Lone Bamboo's cohesion seemed to improve. Although their personalities and powers were different, they were both very talented in the field of combat. They quickly became familiar with each other's strengths and managed to meld their styles. Before long, they were each able to guess what the other's next move was going to be. Their cooperation became more synergetic. Finally, Han Sen was able to restrain the Silver Destroyer for a moment, and Lone Bamboo was able to use his purple godlight on the creature. At that pivotal moment of combat, the light shone across the Silver Destroyer's body. While the Silver Destroyer was incapacitated, Han Sen pulled back the snake-core snake bow as far as he could. The arrow of rainbow light flew forward, punching into one of the empty eye sockets of the Silver Destroyer. Dong! The sound of metal striking metal rang out. Han Sen's arrow exploded from inside the Silver Destroyer's eye. The explosion ripped that chunk of the helmet off, connecting one empty eye socket with the other. The Silver Destroyer behaved as if it didn't feel any pain, and it kept swinging its sword at Han Sen. As Han Sen and Lone Bamboo's cooperation became more in sync, they began to land more and more strikes on the Silver Destroyer. After fighting for 7 hours, Han Sen had managed to unleash 23 arrows. Each one pierced through the Silver Destroyer's helmet. Han Sen watched the Silver Destroyer drop to the ground. Then he heard the announcement. Deified Xenogeneic hunted. Silver Destroyer. Obtained deified gene.
No dice.
That is fairly unfortunate. Han Sen was disappointed that he hadn't received a beast soul. He was going to pick up the Silver Destroyer's body when a beam of light suddenly beat him to it. And then, the Silver Destroyer's body vanished. When that beam of light shut off, a silvery egg appeared in the body's place. Many strange symbols became visible across its surface. As the two of them returned from their fight in White King City, Han Sen's heart was unsettled. Both Black King City and White King City gave Han Sen the unsettling feeling that he was being watched by some larger entity. But the sky didn't have the power to control the White Jade Jing. If someone really did have authority over that place, that would be truly scary. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo had worked together to kill the deified Xenogeneic in White King City. News of their feat spread through Sky Palace like wildfire. The next day, when Han Sen decided to go to Black King City, he found Exquisite standing on his little jade island. Lady Exquisite, why are you here? Han Sen knew this was bad news. It had been so long that their agreement had slipped his mind. He hadn't thought about it when he accepted Lone Bamboo's invitation to visit White King City. Now that everyone knew he had helped kill a deified Xenogeneic, Exquisite thought it would be a fine time to revisit her arrangement with Han Sen. It was just as Han Sen thought. Exquisite eyed him up and down and said, "Killing a deified Xenogeneic isn't the work of a crippled man. You seem to be in fine shape, if you ask me." Even though Han Sen wanted to object and claim he wasn't healed, he knew Exquisite would no longer believe him. Han Sen fell silent, then nodded and said, I'm almost healed. If you are in this much of a rush, give me a time and date. Scheduling something for the future is asking for further delays. How about right now? Exquisite didn't want to wait any longer. She was worried that if they continued to drag this out, she would never be able to claim him. Sure. Where? Han Sen asked. He knew this had to come to an end at some point. The battle arena. Exquisite obviously wanted everyone in Sky Palace to attend. Once everyone knew what was going on, it would curtail Han Sen's ability to delay proceedings any longer. Sure, Han Sen agreed. Then, he went to the arena with Exquisite. Shortly after Han Sen and Exquisite arrived, the news of their bout spread quickly. All of Sky Palace heard what was happening, and a short time later, all of the floating islands around the arena were packed with spectators. Everyone already knew why Exquisite had stayed in Sky Palace. When it was reported that Han Sen had gone to the arena with Exquisite, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen. Do you guys think Brother Han can defeat Exquisite? Of course he can. Brother Han has an 11 armor talent. Exquisite only has a 9 armor talent. There's more to it than that. The God Spirit Touch evolved under Han Sen's influence, so there could have been a mistake. We know too little about the way talents are judged. However, everyone knows of the very high's gene powers. Although Brother Han isn't weak, he has mostly relied on xenogenetic treasures to achieve what he has this time. He won't be allowed to use treasures. That is bad news for Brother Han. *T. Brother Han doesn't need treasure, and he can beat anyone at the same level. Brother Lone Bamboo is here, too. When Han Yin and the Yun sisters heard the news, they all ran to the stadium. Yun Sui was a bit worried about it, and she said, if Brother Han loses, does that mean he will go to the very high immediately? Han Yin shook her head with a serious expression. Don't worry. Big Brother doesn't know how to lose. But what if he does? The people in the very high aren't easy to defeat. Yun Sui was still rather worried. Han Yin looked at Yun Sui, and she couldn't keep herself from sighing. Han Yin could tell Yun Sui fancied her brother. From the time she spent practicing with Yun Chongkong, she had learned that Yun Sui was a good girl. It's a shame that Big Brother already has Yin Ran, and their relationship is amazing. Han Yin shook her head in dismay. She felt a bit sad for Yun Sui. In the hall, a woman turned to Sky Palace leader. If Han Sen loses, are you going to let him go to the very high? If he loses, of course he will go, Sky Palace leader said coldly. Leader, I think you should know how important Han Sen is for the prosperity of Sky Palace, the woman said with a frown. That is why the very high want him so badly. Do you think that the very high's old man would allow Exquisite to give up on Lone Bamboo so easily? Sky Palace leader smiled. If the very high know that Han Sen can bless people, isn't that even worse for us? Our plan will become even more difficult to complete, the woman said. Upon hearing that, Sky Palace leader frowned. A while later he said, the first seat has been in the big silent system for a long time. We don't know what happened to him. We don't know when he'll be back, but without him, I don't believe if this can continue. I have sent a group of people to the big silent system, but in a place like Big Silence, it can be practically impossible to find a single person. Out of every 100 people that go there, it is likely only one will return. The woman sighed. Wait a bit longer. If this really doesn't work, then we'll have to put pressure on you, Shanshin, Sky Palace leader said. The woman nodded and didn't say anything further. Sky Palace leader's gaze was fixed to the arena. He didn't say anything, but he was thinking to himself, maybe he is a good choice. Although he won't stand much of a chance, it is better than putting all my eggs in one basket. In the arena, Han Sen looked at Exquisite. Exquisite said emotionlessly, per the terms of our agreement, you will not use xenogenetic treasures. You can only use your body and geno arts to fight. If you win, I will leave and never allow the very high to pester you again. If I lose, I will follow you to the very high. I will listen to your orders, Han Sen said quickly. Good. Exquisite nodded. Her expression was chilling. Her third eye slowly opened to reveal the Tai Chi Yin Yang eye. She has just come on stage, and she's already using her very high eye. It looks like Exquisite is taking Brother Han seriously. It is rare to see the very high in a fight, especially when they are still kings. and even more so to watch them use their very high eye. That just proves Exquisite is desperate to get Han Sen to join the very high. If it was me, I would have just followed her and done whatever she said. Your development would benefit so much with the very high, and you'd be surrounded by beautiful women. Why wouldn't he want to go? I wonder what goes on in Lone Bamboo and Han Sen's minds. That's why you're just a bottom-of-the-barrel student. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo are geniuses. Han Sen looked at his enemy gravely. They were both 9th-tier kings. Han Sen wasn't afraid of any creature, but Exquisite was from the very high. She had countless geno arts and secret skills in her pocket, so he had to be very careful. The moment she opened her very high eye, Exquisite became that robotic person again. She just stood there, not saying anything or even glancing around. Raw power suddenly rushed down into the arena. The whole place was twisted by some strange energy. Is that her real power? Han Sen squinted slightly. He saw the space around the woman continue to thrash and twist. Although Exquisite was right in front of him, he could barely see her now. As Exquisite stood in the arena, she looked more like a piece of machinery than a living being. Her expression was utterly placid, as if she could see through everything. Even sages and prophets wouldn't be so calm and controlled. No matter how many times I see this, I'm always struck by both the power and the cruelty of the very high eye. They have managed to combine the sky with their body. They should be the real sky people. But combining with the sky makes them a part of the universal rule set. Does the real Exquisite still exist? Sky Palace leader looked at Exquisite and sighed. Our Alpha worried about that too. That was why he insisted on interbreeding with another race to create an entirely new people. It brought about very special changes for the very high eye. Our very high eyes might have weakened now that they are no longer perfectly aligned with the universal rule set, but the changes did open the door for other, grander opportunities. It has more possibilities than the very high eye. The woman paused and went on to say, but anyway, we are part of the universe. There is no way for us to disconnect from it, no matter what we do. From that perspective, the path of the very high is the correct one. They are the race that is closest to the weave that composes the universe. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. We should just take the path we feel is right. Results are something only time can tell us, Sky Palace leader said with a shrug. Han Sen was admiring Exquisite's power. He watched her use this ability once before, but seeing it again was just as moving. People weren't perfect. Everyone had their flaws. When Exquisite opened her very high eye, however, she no longer seemed like a mortal being with failings and frailties. It was as if she wasn't even a person. She was like some art piece created by none other than God himself. Use all your strength, or else you won't stand a chance, Exquisite told Han Senator. Her words might have sounded cocky, but there was no cockiness in her tone. It was more like she was just speaking facts. Han Sen smiled. He lifted his hand like a knife and used Fong to slash toward her. The last time they fought, they had been using the water of a nearby pond. It was like a practice session for him, and Exquisite hadn't used all her very high power. This time, it was different. She wasn't holding back. Exquisite's battling power was firing on all cylinders. Purple knife air flew out of his palm like the fangs of a toxic snake that was leaping forward to bite her. It was a quick, cruel, and accurate slash. The strike was almost too fast to track. Isha saw Han Sen use Fong, and she couldn't help but nod. Han Sen's teeth knife was different from her own, but it had already reached the skill ceiling. This display of his had asserted his position as one of the greatest teeth knife elites. Sky Palace had many elites that made use of knives, and when they saw Han Sen's attack, they were surprised. Even people who didn't know about knives could tell how strong that attack was. It had reached an unbelievable level. It was no worse than the skill of a deified elite. Although I don't want to admit it, talent really does determine how far a person can go. Like Brother Han, for example. He can perform a knife skill as impressive as that. In Sky Palace, I am afraid only Lone Bamboo and Yushan Shin can be compared to him, a Sky Palace student said with a sigh. The next second, that same Sky Palace student felt his eyes widen. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Han Sen's shocking strike had missed. As the attack flew forward, Exquisite stood where she was and didn't move. Han Sen's attack just flashed right through her, and it didn't even ruffle her hair. Exquisite's white clothes didn't even flutter in the wind as she calmly looked at Han Sen and said, "Continue. Use all your power." Han Sen didn't move. Then he summoned his power and began to use all of his skills from Teeth Knife. To be honest, Han Sen never really focused on knife skills, but he had tried very hard to practice them. All of his skills had become very powerful, and not many people at his level were so skilled. But over the next few minutes, he used every teeth knife-derived skill that he knew. And that entire time, Exquisite stood where she was. She was unmoving. She didn't even wiggle her toes. Han Sen's knife airs flew past her harmlessly. The Sky Palace students knew the very high were strong, but they were still frozen. They couldn't imagine what sort of skill was being used against Han. Senator Exquisite had somehow made her opponent miss every strike without moving a finger. She hadn't been damaged in the least. No one would think that Han Sen would make the mistake of missing his opponent, but even if he did, there was no way that all of his knife skills would fail to touch her. Brother Lone Bamboo, what power is Exquisite using? How can she avoid taking any damage when she's just standing there? Yun Sui asked Lone Bamboo, who was beside her. Lone Bamboo waited for a while before saying, "She might not have moved, but in a way, she's still hiding." What is the difference? Yun Susang couldn't help herself from asking. Lone Bamboo thought for a minute and then said, "We know that movement is relative. When you're flying a ship and you look out the window, it might look like the things outside are going backward instead of the ship going forward." Yun Susang heard this, and with a trembling body, she said, "Do you mean Exquisite isn't the one moving, but it is actually the whole world?" "Something like that. Since she is only a 9th-tier king, her ability isn't that powerful yet. But the arena is shifting because of her, at least." Lone Bamboo nodded. "The whole world is being altered by her. That must mean that Brother Han is going to lose," Yun Sui said with worry. "Maybe not. I was just explaining what she's doing. Exquisite is still only a king-class fighter. She isn't as strong as a deified creature. There is a limit to how much she can influence the world. If Han Sen goes beyond that limit, he can be the train that stops moving in a scene," Lone Bamboo said. "They are both 9th-tier kings? Can Brother Han's power exceed what Exquisite strength can control?" Yun Sui looked at Lone Bamboo, expecting an answer. "Yes," Lone Bamboo answered with certainty. After Lone Bamboo said yes, Han Sen cast Fong again, repeating that same Geno art. There's no point in using it twice. Exquisite still stood where she had started. But as she said that, she suddenly stopped and looked down. Huh. The arena echoed with the sound of clothing being torn. Exquisite's left sleeve had been ripped off. Purple teeth power spread across her garment. "You said using the same skill wouldn't work?" Han Sen smiled at Exquisite as he spoke. At that moment, the Sky Palace students felt as if giant boulders had been lifted from their shoulders. They breathed deep sighs of relief. Han Sen was the best in the Sky Palace, but Exquisite faced him calmly. For some time, Han Sen hadn't been able to harm a single hair on her head. The woman had stood against his attacks, as steady as a mountain. Seeing Han Sen's attacks fail had crushed the Sky Palace students and prevented them from breathing. It made them think Exquisite was a god that couldn't be beaten. But then, Han Sen's knife was able to cut Exquisite's clothing. Seeing that small victory calmed the anxious audience. "Continue," Exquisite said. She waved her sleeves, and the teeth power was extinguished like someone had tossed a bucket of water over a campfire. Han Sen waved his hand again, using Fong to attack Exquisite. This time, he used even more power and speed. Exquisite finally moved, but she only took half a step. That was enough for Han Sen's Fong to go wide and miss her. Even so, it didn't look as if she was going to fight back. Han Sen pushed himself to release even more power, making the next move a few times stronger than the last. He used his teeth knife once again. Exquisite's feet moved gracefully, lightly sliding her to the side and letting her dodge every teeth knife attack Han Sen launched. Han Sen's teeth knife was unable to touch Exquisite's clothes a second time. Although Han Sen's speed can break through the effect that Exquisite is casting on the arena, he cannot catch up to her. This isn't a good situation for Han Sen to be in. Han Sen needs to overcome both the skill she is using and her own innate speed, Thousand Feather Crane said. as he understood Han Sen's situation. Very high powers are so scary. It's like they're cheating. The whole universe is helping her, Yun Sui said with depression. Of course. Otherwise, the very high wouldn't have become the best race, would they? Even born deified ancient gods envy their power, Lone Bamboo said. As this was going on, Sky Palace leader observed Han Sen with great interest. He smiled and said, "The very high are known for their strength. To fight against the very high is to fight against the whole universe, in a sense. Although Exquisite's level is low and she cannot change the universe much, any of her other peers would be at a severe disadvantage against her. Unless you are 1 or 2 tiers higher than the very high, it is difficult to fight them. How Han Sen seeks to deal with this will be interesting." "You think Han Sen actually stands a chance in this fight?" the woman asked in shock. She turned to the Sky Palace leader with a quizzical expression on her face. "I thought you always liked him too," Sky Palace leader said. "I liked him because of his powers of blessing and the deified weapons he wields. His talent isn't bad. It's probably better than those of anyone else on his level, but his skill alone won't be enough to deal with the very high. I'm not saying that Han Sen is weak. It's just that the very high are too strong," the woman said. "And yet, maybe this will work out for Han Sen anyway," the Sky Palace leader said thoughtfully as he watched Han Sen. Han Sen cast another strike with teeth knife. Then, he stopped attacking. "What other Geno arts do you have?" "Use them," Exquisite commanded. She still wanted to see more of Han Sen's powers, so she didn't attack yet. As the Sky Palace students watched Exquisite, it was as if they were looking at a Valkyrie that couldn't be defeated. Once again, she had become untouchable. Han Sen wasn't intimidated, though. He had seen Exquisite slave away as a maid to the crocodile gods, so he couldn't think of her as some unbeatable creature. Plus, Exquisite's power didn't seem entirely unbreakable to Han Sen. Many Sky Palace students froze as they looked at Han's senator. If they were in his shoes, they knew how desperate they would feel. They wouldn't even be able to ruffle Exquisite's clothes. They just wanted to know if Han Sen had a sufficient amount of power to break Exquisite. If he was unable to break her, and Exquisite unleashed a strike, she would only need that one skill to beat Han's senator. After all, the universe was strengthening her might. It was hard to imagine how crippling that strike might be. Han Sen swung his hands and spoke to Exquisite. "I've finished warming up. Now we begin." Holy **T. Warming up? That was just him stretching? "Brother Han, this bluffing of yours is a bit too much." "Haha, Brother Han is Brother Han. His bluffing is so fresh." Han Sen had been using power that only the best 9th-tier kings could match. There was no way that he had been holding back the majority of his strength. But even so, the Sky Palace students began to grow a little excited again. When they looked at Exquisite, she no longer seemed quite as untouchable as she had before. When Exquisite had first turned on her very high eye, her emotions seemed to disappear. She had seemed perfectly calm since then, but now she frowned. "This guy's poker face is too good," the Sky Palace leader wanted to laugh. "He's just like you when you were young," the woman said. "When I was young, I was really strong." "I didn't pretend like he is," the Sky Palace leader immediately corrected her. The woman rolled her eyes at him. She didn't say anything further, but scorn seemed to drip off of her. The Sky Palace leader was very smart, and he stopped talking. After all, that woman knew everything about his past. "Since we're done practicing, let us begin," Exquisite said very calmly. She had only shown her emotions for the tiniest moment, and what Han Sen said didn't affect her much. Very highs forget love was no joke. Exquisite's level with it was low, but a deified very high could watch her husband and children be humiliated and killed in front of her without feeling a single thing. "Then you must look closely." Han Sen slowly raised his right hand. He clenched his fingers together to make a fist. Everyone could see Han Sen preparing to unleash a punch, but he suddenly stopped. "Have you heard the old saying?" "What saying?" Exquisite asked. "I am the greatest of my league," Han Sen said. He said each word slowly. "No." Exquisite knew what Han Sen meant, but her expression never wavered. Actions spoke a lot louder than words. When the Sky Palace students heard him, they thought this was too much. But judging from Han Sen's situation, it wasn't too much. "Then you should learn it now." Han Sen swung his fist. BZZD. Han Sen's body tore through the fabric of space, disappearing from everyone's vision. When he appeared again, he punched Exquisite square in the face. Exquisite's nose fountained blood as her body was sent soaring away. She crashed into the ceiling of the arena with such force that even the protective shielding shimmered. As this happened, all of Sky Palace fell silent. The students were so silent that they could have heard a rat fart. I am the greatest of my level. Suddenly, everyone felt very differently about the words that Han Sen had just spoken. Exquisite's body hit the ground with a thump. When she rose to her feet, she did so like a shambling zombie. Her bloody face and broken nose had instantly returned to normal. She was as pretty as she had been before Han Sen's punch, and it didn't look as if she had sustained any injuries. What kind of Geno art is that? Exquisite asked Han Sen. Han Sen had been able to increase his speed until he was faster than the manipulated universe. He had moved too quickly for her to even react. That wasn't something a 9th-tier king should have been able to achieve. Only a handful of half-deifieds could reach such a speed. Exquisite knew a few people who could accomplish this, but Han Sen wasn't on that short list. The ones she knew were all half-deified. Yu Shanshin of Sky Palace was one such individual. He could move that quickly, but he used his Sky Eye and the extreme evil path. Han Sen was just a crystallizer that couldn't use a Sky Eye. That wasn't a Geno art. It was just a simple punch. Han Sen smiled. Son of AB*TCH. I am now buying into Han Sen's bluffing. Haha, a random punch. Well said, Brother Han. This very high is actually quite lame. She couldn't even withstand one of Brother Han's punches. Many of the students at Sky Palace were excited. None of them liked Exquisite much. They were all happy to insult her. Yunsui couldn't help but smile. What is wrong with Brother Han? Is he not capable of behaving humbly? He has done what he should have. I never liked these very high. Anyway, Yun Suseng said. Lone Bamboo didn't say anything. He merely smiled. The audience thought Han Sen was just trying to make Exquisite mad, but he knew Han Sen was speaking the truth. It really was just a simple punch. Lone Bamboo had fought against Han Sen once before. Han Sen really was that fast. His fitness was so high, it would be difficult to find a half-deified that could equal him. Lone Bamboo had become one with the purple-eyed butterfly, which was how his own fitness had increased to unbelievable levels. But if he was compared to Han Sen, he still fell far short. 4 of Han Sen's Geno arts had reached the 9th tier. His fitness had been reinforced 4 times. Ordinary 9th tier kings simply couldn't compete. Even if Han Sen didn't use his super god spirit body, his fitness was still better than others of the same level. By a wide margin, too. Against other kings, Han Sen really did reign supreme. His talk about being the best of his league wasn't some baseless boast. After all, there were no other creatures that could experience the reinforcement of 4 Geno arts the way Han Sen had. In addition, the Geno arts he had focused on were amongst the best ever. With the fitness he wielded, he was still a bit weak against deified creatures, but kings and half-deifieds were no longer a serious threat. That was a simple punch? Then let me see how many simple punches you can throw. Although Exquisite was using her very high eye, she couldn't help but look a little angry. Exquisite lifted her right arm and used the edge of her hand like a knife. With it, she tried slashing toward Han Senator. Everyone immediately realized that she was using Han Sen's own skill. This was Fong. The students of Sky Palace were in shock. Teeth Knife wasn't an insanely good skill, but it was the Rebate's secret Geno art. Practicing it required the body of a Rebate. It was remarkable that Han Sen was able to use it, but after all, he was Isha's only student. Somehow, Exquisite was able to use Teeth Knife, too. When she used it, the purple teeth air shredded space. She was wielding the skill with more power than Han Sen's usage had possessed. Exquisite had been in Sky Palace for a year. She hadn't been lazy during that time. Teeth Knife wasn't a secret to the very high, and she had spent time practicing it to achieve a very high proficiency with it. When Exquisite used her very high eye, the entire universe would work to help her. Her knife mind wasn't as good as Han Sen's, but the power in her strikes was above the Teeth Knife Han Sen had used earlier. Han Sen saw the tearing space power coming toward him. The knife air was like the real, raging purple air of a dragon's maw. Still, his expression didn't change. Running the story of genes at maximum, he used his own body to throw a punch toward the purple knife air. As everyone gaped in astonishment, Han Sen's punch broke the knife air that was raging toward him. His counterattack didn't stop there, though. It flew all the way back to Exquisite and pounded her knife hand. Catcha! The sound of breaking bones crunched audibly throughout the arena. The thin bones in Exquisite's hand were shattered by Han Sen's fist. His punch was still unstoppable, and it continued toward Exquisite's chest. Exquisite's face had turned white, but she was able to react instantly. She used God's Wander to disappear from in front of Han Sen, but Han Sen was waiting for her to appear again. When she reappeared, Han Sen's fist was still heading straight toward her. Everyone's mouths opened wide. They couldn't believe their eyes. Even Sky Palace leader looked stunned. After a while, he said, "Not bad. He is as good as I was when I was younger." "He's much stronger than you when you were young," the woman said. She didn't feel bad about the critique. "When I was young, I was stronger than a tiger. I was crueler than a wolf," Sky Palace leader tried to explain. Before he was finished, the woman cut him off. "Could you bully a student of the very high like this when you were younger?" I did beat them," Sky Palace leader coughed. "There is a big difference between beating and bullying," the woman said with a roll of her eyes. Han Sen was playing with Exquisite like a cat with a mouse. In front of that absolute power and speed, Exquisite, who had previously looked like some sort of god, was being used as a punching bag. Her bones were breaking one by one, and she couldn't maintain her regal appearance. Exquisite used all kinds of Geno arts as she tried to fight back, but her efforts were wasted. Han Sen's speed and power completely suppressed her. She couldn't dodge. She couldn't counterattack. Aside from getting pummeled, there was nothing she could do. Han Sen was like an enraged Tyrannosaurus Rex right now. He ignored Exquisite's attacks and allowed her powers to come down on him. Her attacks made slight marks on Spell's armor, but they disappeared quickly after. Every one of Han Sen's punches hit Exquisite, though. Every bone in her body broke under the onslaught. Blood gushed out of her mouth uncontrollably. If she had been fighting someone ordinary, she could have used God's Wander to protect her body. Things would have gone much better for her. But Han Sen's alter ego had already learned God's Wander. Each time she disappeared, he just needed to calculate and predict where Exquisite was going to pop back into reality. Plus, the arena was quite small. There wasn't much room for her to teleport around. Han Sen could easily determine where she was going to show up next. Pang! Exquisite's body hit the dome of the arena again, and the shield flickered and shimmered under the impact. When she landed on the ground in a heap, Exquisite remained where she was and didn't try to get back up again. She looked at Han Sen with astonishment. She couldn't believe it. Her very high eye was active, but she was completely suppressed by another of the same level. Try as she might, she couldn't fight back. "I am the greatest in my league." Exquisite lay on the ground. She stared at Han Sen and didn't try to move. She thought about what Han Sen had told her, and complex emotions washed over her. Brother Han he's too strong. Even Exquisite is trash before Father Han. What kind of very high is she? So scary. The siblings of the Han family are monsters. This is too cruel. He even bullied the crap out of a very high student. Those punches were way too awesome. I never liked the very high, and they wanted to take Brother Han and Brother Lone Bamboo to be their slaves. And see? They don't even have what it takes. The blood of the Sky Palace students was boiling. The very high always acted as if the sky were inferior to them. Right now, as they watched Han Sen destroy Exquisite, they were filled with glee. They all wished they could batter the very high in the same way Han Sen could. Can this fight end now? Han Sen turned back to Exquisite, who was still sitting on the ground at the edge of the arena. She was staring right at him. Exquisite seemed to have been startled from a deep slumber. As she stared at Han Sen, resolve settled into her eyes. "No, it isn't over yet. The universe is still on my side. I won't lose, especially not to you." Exquisite slowly stood up. Her hair rose and waved in the air, despite the absence of wind. Her Tai Chi eyes spun dangerously, and the black and white colors glowed. Her aura began to spread ominously, forming black and white airs out of her body. They began to spin together, forming the structure of a substance chain. She's forcing her 9 tears to become one. She is becoming half deified right now. The realization rolled through the arena like a thunderclap. BZZD. As everyone reeled from the shock, Exquisite's black and white air exploded. Black Geno armor appeared and encased her whole body. Her face was shielded, too. Only her very high eye could be seen. As this happened, her very high eye turned pure white. It was like a small nuclear reactor, and a scary power was emerging. At this same moment, Exquisite's presence was being pushed to a level that others couldn't imagine. She was like a scary monster queen, and she used her third eye to look icily at Han Sen. Exquisite turned to Han Sen and raised her hand. She made a pulling motion. She didn't seem to release any power, but the whole of space shifted. It was as if the space between the two fighters had been severely reduced. Instantly, Han Sen's body was pulled directly in front of Exquisite's hands. Exquisite grabbed him by the neck. "No one can beat me in my universe." Exquisite used the white flame in her third eye to look at Han Sen while she spoke. After that, Exquisite grabbed Han Sen by the neck. Her body began to generate a frightening black and white power. It felt as if all the power in the universe was draining into her hands. If she even twitched, she would surely break Han Sen's neck. "Now I will give you the chance to concede," Exquisitely said to Han Sen as she looked at him. Her face looked like it had been carved from marble. Her voice was a dead monotone, like the grinding of a machine. It was as if she would be happy to turn Han Sen's body to dust if he failed to agree. "I still prefer it when you smile." "This look doesn't suit you," Han Sen said, frowning slightly at Exquisite. "I'm telling you to concede." Exquisite thundered. Her black and white air rose madly like two ravenous demons. It was like they were going to ravage Han Sen's body and consume him. Not even a single bone would be left behind. "No one can force me to do something I don't think is right," Han Sen replied. Exquisite looked at Han Sen and didn't speak. Her face remained entirely expressionless. The black and white powers in the air became stronger. It looked as if they were on the verge of exploding any second. The Sky Palace students looked at Han Sen with worry. Yun Suyi fidgeted nervously with the hem of her dress. Her nails almost shredded her garments, and she was starting to sweat. "Should we?" The woman looked at Sky Palace leader. Sky Palace leader shook his head. "Wait a bit longer." As he watched Exquisite rage, Han Sen wasn't mad. He just felt sorry for her. She had given up her emotions so she could become one with the universe. To put it nicely, it was like the sky and humans had combined. To be frank, though, it was more like she had become a pawn of the universe. She had thrown away her identity to become a high-class creature. Han Sen had seen people experience similar changes before in Sky Palace, but that had been very different from what he was seeing now. When the sky became one with the sky, they focused a lot more on their emotions. It wasn't like the Very High, who only cared about being one with the universe. If the Very High ever became 100% united with the universe, would they still count as individual people? Han Sen shook his head. There were many things he was unsure of, but he knew for certain that he never wanted that future. He couldn't take this path. Exquisite stood in front of him, and her power raged higher and higher. Han Sen laid his hand against the fist that Exquisite was using to squeeze his neck. She lost her grip on Han Sen's throat. The white light in Exquisite's eyes spilled over. Her black and white airs erupted like a volcano. Her other hand flew toward Han Sen like a bullet. Her black and white air was generating a substance chain on that fist. That fist was so strong that every face in Sky Palace changed. Yun Suyi was so nervous that it felt like her heart was going to leap out of her chest at any moment. The two fighters were at very close range, and the power that Exquisite wielded was frightening. If Han Sen got punched, his body would be destroyed. The next second, however, the crowd noticed that Han Sen's hands were moving as well. He grabbed Exquisite's fist, and then, both of her hands fell under Han Sen's control. That scary black and white air began to shred Han Sen's hands. Deep grooves were torn into Han Sen's spell armor. Blood came gushing out from the lacerations. The scary black and white air stormed through the arena. Han Sen was at the center of the storm, with his armor taking the brunt of it. Wounds kept appearing across his body. Didn't I tell you? Against another of the same level, I am king. The only things that can fall to a king are smiles and a woman's beauty. Using force against me just won't do, Han Sen said. Then, he tightened his fists with new strength. He threw Exquisite's black and white air-surrounded body away. Han Sen moved with the arc of her toss. He swung his fists like a hurricane. Beneath the force of Han Sen's blows, the black and white air was waning. Han Sen's punches pummeled Exquisite's black armor. Pang! Pang! The collision of fists against armor produced sharp, striking noises. They were so fast, there was hardly a break between each sound. How could this? Exquisite's face was etched with disbelief. She felt as if her connection with the universe was being severed. Under Han Sen's fists, her will, and the power that bound her to the universe, was being taken away. Her oneness with the world was becoming blurred and difficult to grasp. She felt as if she was returning to her former self before she started to practice all this. The terror of the unknown and all kinds of bad emotions were slowly seeping into her. It made her feel fear and restlessness and despair and pain. All this, and many more emotions she had never felt before, were starting to overwhelm her. How? Why? I am already half deified. Why am I still losing? Why? The physical pain she was enduring was a pittance compared to the mental pain she was suffering. These emotions that she had never felt before were all inside her, mixing her up. They were ruining her ability to think. As she watched the shadows of the raging fists delivered by the man before her, she had never felt so weak before. She felt small, weak, and helpless. It was as if the universe and everything inside it had abandoned her. It made her far more frightened than the damage she would incur physically. So what? Even if the whole universe is on your side, if you can't smile, it is meaningless. Owning the universe is pointless if there is no happiness. Only your smile is eternal, said Han Sen's voice next to her ear. And then came his final punch. It struck her in the stomach. It was a nasty punch, and her whole body rose under the force of the impact. Pang! Exquisite was in the air. The black Geno armor she wore shattered like frail glass, becoming a collection of shards dancing in the air. Her black and white air fizzed into smoke. Exquisite's body rolled between the shattered pieces of armor. Blood came out of her mouth like rain, soaking the arena. The light of her very high eye had been extinguished. Her ordinary eyes had been closed, but now they were open again, and they were black. Those eyes didn't possess a strong will. They didn't look emotionless and cold as they once had. They looked helpless. They looked lonely. They looked confused. There was a whole bevy of different emotions swirling within them. Voila! Shattered bits of armor bounced across the floor of the arena, and Exquisite's body fell into Han Sen's arms. Hopefully, the next time I see you, I can see that smile. Han Sen's face was blurry above Exquisite. When she heard what he said, she passed out. Sky Palace fell silent. A very high half-deified, who should have been invincible to anyone who wasn't fully deified, had been beaten. Han Sen had used his fists to obliterate her self-gene armor. It was difficult for the sky to wrap their minds around. Han Sen picked up the heavily injured Exquisite and carried her out of the arena. The Sky Palace students that had been watching finally woke up from their daze. Against another of the same level, I am king. I can't believe Brother Han could actually do it. What do you mean he could actually do it? He has already done it. The very high claim themselves as the strongest in the universe, and a half-deified has just been destroyed by Han Sen, who is just a 9th-tier king. That is scary to think about. With a fitness level like that, he is scarier than the strongest of the dragons. You won't be able to find anyone with a fitness level higher than Han Sen's. Don't forget, this is Godfather Han. He can bless others and make them deified. He must be able to bless himself as well. Throughout Sky Palace, everyone was talking about this. The most commonly repeated phrase was against another of the same level, I am king. Even a long time after, Sky Palace students fervently discussed the events. Although the leaders of Sky Palace issued a stern warning to students not to leak this news to the outside, Sky Palace didn't have steel walls. Despite their attempts to suppress the story, news of Han Sen's victory leaked. But most of the elites that heard about this fight didn't care. No one believed that a crystallizer king could manage to fight a half-deified very high and emerge victorious. Most of the nobles that heard about this thought that it was just a fabricated tale. Only the Sky Palace students who had witnessed the fight understood just how scary Han Sen's fitness was. A Buddha deified heard about this incident, and his response became famous across the universe. "You're the best too, Han Sen?" That deified Buddha said this to mock Han's senator. He thought people were making up outlandish stories that were far too ridiculous to believe. And then, for a long time, "You're the best too, Han Sen," became a quip that was used against anyone being hilariously boastful. The phrase really caught on, and it was used everywhere. People mocked Han Sen shamelessly, and many didn't even know that the phrase had come from the Buddha. What a scary fitness level. How did he do that? How can a crystallizer have a body with that much raw power? The woman said with shock. She never expected the fight would turn out this way. It must be related to the Geno art he has practiced. His Geno art was something Isha asked me to take a look at. She wanted me to help her modify it. That Geno art is nearly impossible to learn, though. When I looked at it, I didn't think any creature could practice it. Even deified fighters wouldn't have a body strong enough for it. In the beginning, I thought it was a prank, but I think now that Han Sen really has learned it, and that might mean he will become someone incredibly powerful. It is rather surprising. After pausing, Sky Palace leader shook his head. It's a shame Han Sen doesn't even know how he learned it. Otherwise, if he was able to share the secrets of this Geno art, making a strong race wouldn't be too difficult. Is there no way to modify the Geno art? The woman's heart jumped as she asked. I researched it before. It is impossible to modify. Plus, the Geno art belongs to Han's senator. Without his permission, we can't freely distribute it. That is a promise I made to Isha, Sky Palace leader said. That is a shame, the woman said, her voice full of regret. Come on, we need to go kiss that kid's *SS. And we need to comfort Exquisite to make sure that we haven't just started a war, Sky Palace leader said. After the woman left, Sky Palace leader picked up a paper and pen. He wrote down Han Sen, and then, after looking at it for a while, he drew 2 circles next to the name. He then placed a question mark beside them. He looked at the name, and then proceeded to write for a while. Sky Palace leader spoke to himself as he did, saying, maybe he really is a suitable candidate. No matter what the outside world said, after that fight, Han Sen's position in Sky Palace was elevated to even loftier heights. Although he didn't have sky blood in his veins, they essentially treated him as if he was one of their own. Every time Han Sen went to teach Geno arts, his lecture hall would be packed to the gills. Many pureblood sky students would come and listen to him teach Geno arts. Many kings and even half-deifieds came to listen to any lecture that he gave. Exquisite's self-gene armor had been broken, and it would take a long time for her to heal. Han Sen thought he might end up in trouble, but Thousand Feather Crane told him that Exquisite wasn't planning on coming after him. She hadn't mentioned what had happened to the Very High. Owning the universe is pointless if there is no happiness. Only your smile is eternal. Hopefully, the next time I see you, I will see you smile. Exquisite sat in front of a window. She looked at the clouds, frozen in thought. She kept thinking about what Han Sen had said to her. After a year spent in recovery, Han Sen was now almost as healthy as he had been before the Medusa's shield sucked him dry. But rather than making his life easier, recovering from his injuries actually brought him new difficulties. Before, while his body was known to be damaged, no one had made any demands of him. Now that he was well again, all kinds of people tried to flex their authority or exploit their relationship with Han Sen to ask him to bless their children. Some of these people were easy for Han Sen to turn down, whereas others were more difficult, like Yun Changkong and the 6th elder that looked after the rebate. There were others who had no direct connection to Han Sen, but they were deifieds and high-ranking officers of Sky Palace. If Han Sen rejected them all, he would offend everyone in Sky Palace. But if he accepted their requests, he would be pestered constantly and he would never get a moment's rest. Brother Han, how is it going? Han Sen was coming out of the 7th tower when more trouble found him. He raised his head when he heard the voice calling for him. It was Yu Jing. He was riding a king-class xenogenic mount, It looked as if the man was doing all right for himself. I'm doing okay. You haven't come to me to request a blessing, right? Yu Jing always had a purpose for visiting Han Senator at heart. Yu Jing was an evil businessman. Running into him was never a coincidence. When Yu Jing heard Han Sen say that, he laughed. You must be really annoyed by the people who've been pestering you lately, but you won't have to suffer it for much longer. In fact, I have a proposal that can return some peace to your life. Oh? And what would that be? Han Sen looked at Yu Jing with confusion. He didn't believe Yu Jing would have come all this way just to solve Han Sen's problem for him. The man wasn't that nice. Yu Jing looked serious when he said, the people of Sky Palace are coming to you privately because there is no official way for them to seek your blessings. If you create an official channel, perhaps set up an auction where people can bid for a blessing or two, then they'll stop coming to see you privately. You could earn a lot of money and remove some stress from your life at the same time. When Han Sen heard this suggestion, he knew Yu Jing was up to something. The idea was stupid. Rather than fixing Han Sen's problem, it would only be more of a pain in the *SS for him. Having an auction would allow him to make a lot of money, but it wouldn't stop the authority figures of Sky Palace from contacting Han Sen personally. If he refused to give blessings outside of the auction, people would just think Han Sen was a greedy person. If he merely sold his blessings without helping the leadership of Sky Palace directly, people might end up hating him. That told Han Sen the idea for an auction probably wouldn't work. If he altered this method slightly, though, he could allow Sky Palace leader to determine how his blessing talent was used. The leader would determine who received the blessings, which would take pressure off of Han Sen. If the Sky Palace deifieds wanted a slot, they would pester Sky Palace leader instead of Han Sen. Of course, Han Sen couldn't use all his power on blessing others. He would have to keep telling the lie that giving out blessings affected his lifespan and strength. He could say that it took 2 or 3 years for the negative side effects of a blessing to dissipate. That way, he would only have to bless on rare occasions. Han Sen could also claim that Sky Palace leader completely controlled how the blessings were distributed. If someone came to Han Sen privately, he could say Sky Palace leader forbade him from giving out blessings outside of the official channel. If Han Sen offered Sky Palace leader such a valuable opportunity, there was no way that the man could refuse. It would be a disservice to his people if he let this chance go by. Thinking of this, Han Sen came up with a plan, and his depression evaporated. I don't want to hold an auction. Giving a blessing severely damages my body. I have no interest in blessing others unless it is absolutely necessary. Earning additional resources isn't a good enough reason, Han Sen told Yu Jing. That is a crying shame, Yu Jing mumbled, heartbroken. Brother Yu Jing, did you just come here to tell me that? Han Sen asked Yu Jing, raising an eyebrow. Not really. I'm here because someone asked me to conduct trade with you, Yu Jing quickly said. It won't be something that has to do with blessings, right? Han Sen asked, suddenly alert. Yu Jing laughed and said, of course not. A half-deified relative of mine wants to ask you to kill a xenogeniac with him. There hasn't been a chance for him to talk to you face-to-face, however. So, he asked me to make the request in his stead. Killing a xenogeniac? Why would he ask me? There are many elites here. If he needed someone, why would he come to me? Han Sen was shocked. He couldn't believe some Sky Palace half-deified wanted his help just to kill a xenogeniac. My relative is a bit special. He can't ask the deifieds for help, and he wants to hunt a deified xenogeniac. He heard that you and Lone Bamboo managed to bring down a xenogeniac, and that is why he wanted you to help him. There is plenty of room for negotiation. My relative is very rich, Yu Jing explained. This half-deified person was called Yu Kuing. He was one of the more experienced half-deifieds in Sky Palace. He was from the same generation as Sky Palace leader, and he was known to be quite talented. He had a chance to become deified long ago, but something happened in his family that had kept him from doing so. He still wasn't deified. What was so important that he put his ascension on the back burner? Han Sen asked. Han Sen wasn't just asking this out of curiosity. He was worried that this could end up dragging him into some internal conflict within Sky Palace. Han Sen was very careful to avoid involving himself in such things. Yu Jing understood Han Senator. He smiled and explained, don't worry, Brother Han. No one in Sky Palace has a grudge against Uncle Yu Kuing. He hasn't become deified because of something that happened to his son. His son got involved with the wrong people and accidentally leaked classified information and screwed up some of Sky Palace's plans. Although this had nothing to do with Uncle Yukuin, he went to jail for 30 years on his son's behalf. He was released a few years ago. One of our deifieds would help Uncle Yukuin if he asked. According to the rules of Sky Palace, he has every right to request aid. But Yukuin is very ashamed about what his son did to the people of Sky Palace, so he doesn't want to ask any of the deifieds for help. That is why he wants to work with you. You don't have to worry that he won't be able to pay you. He is old and has a lot of money. Let me consider this for a while, Han Sen answered, carefully not agreeing. Yukuin's situation was complex, so Han Sen wanted to consider the potential ramifications for working with the man. Okay, give me a response as soon as you can. Uncle Yukuin is waiting, and I want to give him an answer, Yu Jing said. Han Sen agreed. After saying goodbye to Yu Jing, he left his own little island and headed to the primary island where Sky Palace leader lived. You don't want to offend people, so you want me to do it for you? You are quite smart, Sky Palace leader said to Han Sen with a smile. Han Sen hadn't explained his true purpose, but Sky Palace leader immediately recognized what he was doing. Sky Palace leader is so smart. I want to do everything I can for Sky Palace, but sadly, my body is unable to keep up. I cannot bless a student every day. Han Sen feigned complete sincerity. He looked as if he wanted nothing more than to serve Sky Palace leader. Fine, I'll be the bad guy, but in return, you will have to do something for me, Sky Palace leader said to Han Sen with a smile. Old fox, Han Sen muttered to himself. He had expected that if he agreed to give out blessings, he would receive something valuable in return. But it now looked as if he wouldn't earn anything extra, and he would have to do an additional task on the leader's behalf. You can ask me to do anything, Sky Palace leader. Even if it means I will end up destroyed and dead, I will do my best in such a task. I would never ask for anything in return. Han Sen lowered his head and bowed. Is that so? You really won't try to take advantage of the situation? If Han Sen hadn't said the last few words, Sky Palace leader would have probably believed him. However, it was obvious from what Han Sen said that he had been looking for some goodies. If you are willing to do this, I will deal with all the people who come to seek your blessing. You can decide when you want to bless them, or if you want to at all. But if you can do this well, I will still reward you, Sky Palace leader said dispassionately. What is it that you want me to do? Han Sen had started to grow worried as Sky Palace leader spoke. If Sky Palace leader was establishing terms like this, whatever task he wanted to give Han Sen had to be complicated. Go to the very high, Sky Palace leader said simply. Why? Han Sen was shocked. He looked at Sky Palace leader with confusion. He remembered Sky Palace leader saying that he didn't want Han Sen to go to the very high. Sky Palace leader smiled and said, We need a spy amongst them. I think you are up to the task too. Han Sen almost thought his ears were broken. Going to the very high as a spy? Han Sen couldn't think of anything that posed a greater risk. The very high could see into a person's mind. If he was attempting to steal their secrets, it would only take them a split second to discover that. Espionage among the very high would be suicide. If anyone other than Sky Palace leader had suggested this, Han Sen would have assumed that they were simply an idiot. The idea seemed like either pure stupidity or an elaborate way of getting himself killed. Sky Palace leader knew what Han Sen was thinking, and so he said, Don't worry. If I let you go, I have a way to safeguard your mind that will keep them from peering into it. You are no good to me dead. But why would you even want me to go and spy on the very high? Han Sen asked carefully. If he was even going to consider doing this, he had to know more. He needed the details because going to the very high for ulterior motives was a very dangerous game to play. It is very important to me. I need you to find someone within the very high. If you hear news of this person, you need to relay it back to me. You don't have to do anything more dangerous than that, Sky Palace leader said. I'm not very good at looking for people, and I'm not very skilled at socializing. I'm afraid I might fail your task. Han Sen didn't want to go, so this was his way of rejecting the offer. Sky Palace leader looked at Han Sen and coldly said, When you finish this mission, I plan to give you the constellation sea for you and your family. It looks like you aren't interested, though. So, never mind. It is fine. Leader, the constellation C you reference. Is it the xenogenic space outside the shining star system? Han Sen's eyes opened wide as he asked Sky Palace Leader. The constellation C was a xenogenic space that had been discovered some time ago. It was in a part of the universe that belonged to Sky Palace. It was practically in Sky Palace's backyard, so the only way to enter it was through Sky Palace. The constellation C was connected to the shining star system in an underdeveloped, barren system. It was a very unique place, and it showed great promise if anyone ever developed it. Plus, the constellation C was very rich in resources and raw materials. Many elders within Sky Palace wished to take control of the constellation C, and they had begun to fight over it. But because the fights had grown too violent, Sky Palace Leader decided to seal up the constellation C and not give it to anyone. Now, Sky Palace Leader said he was going to open up the constellation C exclusively for Han Senator. He could build a family there. He wouldn't just be permitted to use it. The leader was going to let Han Sen govern the constellation C. It would become Han Sen's territory. If he wanted to, it might even be possible to build a human empire there. Other factions wouldn't be able to meddle or interfere in Han Sen's affairs. Unless Han Sen opened the constellation C's borders to travel, no one would be able to wander in. Plus, the constellation C still had Sky Palace as a shield. It wouldn't end up besieged unless the whole of Sky Palace fell first. Good memory. It is the constellation C near the shining star system. Yes, Sky Palace Leader answered. Han Sen's eyes narrowed in thought. Sky Palace Leader was offering him a ludicrously valuable reward. But that suggested the task wouldn't be simple. Simply relaying information wouldn't be hard, and if Han Sen could truly be taught to protect his mind, the danger level didn't warrant such a reward. Why would Sky Palace Leader be willing to give him something so precious for fulfilling a task that was so easy? May I ask what kind of person you are looking for? Han Sen asked with hesitation. The constellation C was a good place. He wanted it, but he wouldn't be able to enjoy owning it if he died at the hands of the very high. I'm looking for a very high woman. I don't know her name, and I'm afraid her appearance might have changed from what I remember, Sky Palace Leader said thoughtfully. No name? No appearance? How am I supposed to find someone like that? Han Sen was shocked to hear that. Don't worry. There is a way to find her. Otherwise, why would I ask you to look for her? Sky Palace Leader paused. Then, he said seriously, there is a birthmark on her chest that looks like a red heart. You will be able to see it. It is very obvious. Her chest has a birthmark that resembles a red heart? That is quite obvious, you would think. Wait. Chest? Han Sen glanced down at his own chest. He looked strange as he asked Sky Palace Leader, You say you are looking for a very high woman? Yes, Sky Palace Leader said with a nod of his head. Do you think I'll have the chance to check out the chests of various women for that birthmark? Han Sen felt that Sky Palace Leader might be tricking him. If he went to the very high just to check out their women, it would be AF * King Death Wish. If it was an easy task, why would I give you the constellation C? Sky Palace Leader looked at Han Sen and said, You don't even have to look at them yourself. Anyway, you can just ask around. Exquisite is a woman, for instance. She is more likely to have seen it. And if you can get her to tell you, then you will have no trouble. Come back in 4 years, and you can take your family to the constellation C. I will give you all the support you can ask for. I will give you people, if you want. Do you want a boat? I can give you a boat. You won't have to pay taxes for 300 years either. Han Sen was very conflicted. He wanted the constellation C. If there was ever a safe place for him to develop humanity, it would be there. With enough resources and cultivation, he could make them a force to be reckoned with in the universe. That way, they would no longer have to live in small pockets scattered across the universe. He could gather them up there and truly grow their numbers. But before any of that could happen, Han Sen needed his own system. The safest places in the universe were already split up by the more powerful races. Even if Han Sen wanted a slice of good real estate, there was nowhere he could find a piece of that pie. Even the smaller and weaker races had ties with Sky Palace and other big races. It wasn't a matter of simply taking what he wanted and being done with it. Taking a developed system wasn't an option, and a wild system would be too dangerous. Such places weren't suitable for low-level creatures and people to live in. Sky Palace was offering him a xenogenic space. For Han Sen, that would be a perfect place to develop humanity's presence within the Geno universe. Think over my offer. You don't have to rush in giving me your answer. Just tell me when you have decided, Sky Palace leader said.
Han Sen nodded.
He needed to think about this seriously. He couldn't make a decision on a whim, especially one so big. As Han Sen turned to leave, another matter came to mind. Palace leader, Uncle Yukuin, has asked me to kill a deified xenogenic with him. Do you think I should go? Brother Yukuin? Sky Palace leader fell silent for a moment, then said, I know what happened to him. If you think you can do it, then you should go and help him. Brother Yukuin has endured a difficult life. Now that he had received Sky Palace leader's approval, Han Sen was more than okay with going to meet with Yukuin. And so, that was what he did. He wanted to see what sort of deified the man wanted to kill first, though. Then, he could decide if he could truly help. If he did decide to help, he would try his best, but there were still multiple factors to consider before he accepted. After Han Sen left Sky Palace, he contacted Yu Jing. He told Yu Jing what he planned to do, and Yu Jing was happy to quickly arrange for him to meet with Yukuin and discuss the proposal. Should I go or not? Going to the Very High was a very difficult decision for Han Sen to make, but it wasn't something he could allow others to determine for him. Han Sen laid out the pros and cons of this idea many times, and he ultimately decided that yes, he should go to the Very High. He wanted the constellation sea for himself. If he missed out on this chance, God only knew how many more years he would have to wait for an opportunity to get a xenogenic space that was as prestigious as the constellation sea. Plus, if he fought for another xenogenic space, it wouldn't be as safe as the constellation sea. And some xenogenic spaces were actually overdeveloped. They might not allow Han Sen to procure as many resources as he wanted. It looks like I need to go to the Very High, then. Luckily, I have found a way to counter their spying techniques. If Sky Palace leader's way doesn't work, then I have my own method. And if that method doesn't work either, I will have to be like Ningyu and rely solely on my own will to support myself. Han Sen gritted his teeth. The odds against him seemed daunting, but if Ningyu could do it, he believed he would be able to as well. But Han Sen didn't immediately answer Sky Palace leader. He wanted to sort out matters with Uncle Yukuin first, so he could have time to think it over a bit more. There was no need to rush a decision as big as this one. Yu Jing hurriedly established a time for Han Sen and Yukuin to meet. When Han Sen saw Yukuin, it was hard to believe Yukuin was of the same generation as Sky Palace leader. That was because Yukuin looked considerably older than Sky Palace leader. Han Sen didn't know how old Sky Palace leader was, but he appeared to be in his 40s. He seemed very gentle, but there was something perverse about him. He enjoyed messing with people. But Yukuin looked like a very old man, by comparison. His hair was gray, and his face was wrought with wrinkles. Most importantly, his expression looked old and tired, too. He was very dull-looking. He barely looked like a living being. Yukuin was calm. He told Han Sen about the deified xenogenic he planned on killing, but he didn't look very confident that Han Sen could help him. After hearing what the man said, Han Sen fell silent. And then, he honestly told Yukuin, Uncle Yukuin, a trade needs to be fair and equalized. I can help you fight this deified xenogenic. If I fail, I won't take anything, but if we successfully slay this deified xenogenic, what will you give me in return? Yukuin seemed to think about that question a bit. After hearing Han Sen's speech, he pulled something out of his pocket. He set it on the table in front of Han Sen and calmly said, Try your best. Whether or not you succeed, this is yours. Han Sen eyed the thing that Yukuin placed on the table. It was a small wooden statue carved into the shape of a beast. It looked like a rhino. It was the size of a man's hand, and the wood seemed to have yellowed with age. It looked ancient. Han Sen didn't understand what it was. It looked like a decorative trinket that someone might put on a shelf in their house. It didn't release any power, so it didn't seem like a powerful xenogenic treasure, either. Yu Jing was standing to the side, and when he saw that wooden rhino, he looked like he was about to scream. Isn't that the wood spirit rhino? Uncle Kuin, are you really willing to let it go? Han Sen looked at Yu Jing, and Yu Jing went on to say, a long time ago, our race found a butterfly-class plant inside the systems of chaos. Many of our people worked together, but they were only able to retrieve a piece of wood that was 1 foot long. And then, a deified carved the wood into wood spirits. 3 small statues were created in the shapes of an elephant, a rhino, and a horse. This wood spirit rhino is one of them. After pausing, Yu Jing went on to say, although the wood spirit rhino wasn't refined into a treasure, carrying it can aid a warrior's body. It can fill your body with health and make you livelier. It is especially beneficial for people who have been injured. Carrying the wood spirit rhino can heal someone's self-body. Of course, that isn't what is most important about the wood spirit rhino. The most important thing is that the deified who made them also created 3 genoarts and left them inside the 3 wood spirits. If someone gains possession of the statues, they can obtain the genoarts inside. The genoarts of the wood spirit elephant and the wood spirit horse have already been learned by others. They were the giant spirit statue punch and sky river swallowing day skills, respectively. They were the first 2 genoarts. They are famous secret genoarts in Sky Palace. Han Sen jerked in surprise when he heard the name of these 2 genoarts. He had heard of them before. They were the most popular secret genoarts in Sky Palace right now. Even the heirs of Mini Sky that wanted to practice the genoarts had to go through a lot of trouble to be granted permission to learn them. Furthermore, students below King class couldn't even begin to learn them. But just because a skill was restricted didn't mean it was attractive to Han Sen. But what Yu Jing said next totally changed Han Sen's mind. When the first 2 people learned the genoarts of the wood spirit elephant and the wood spirit horse, they received powerful wood spirits. It accelerated their practice. One went from king class straight to half-deified. The other went from half-deified to deified. Han Sen eventually agreed to accept the wood spirit rhino in exchange for helping Yu Kuan slay a deified xenogeniac. Yu Kuan had carried the wood spirit rhino for hundreds of years. He had never been able to understand what was inside it, and after losing hope of ever learning its secrets, he was finally willing to use it as payment for Han Sen to help him slay a deified xenogeniac. If Yu Kuan obtained a deified xenogeniac gene, he could use it to help him become deified. Keeping the wood spirit rhino as a mere ornament would be useless. He wanted to give it to his heir, but his only son had died in an accident. No one else was able to carry on his legacy. What a poor man, Han Sen thought, playing distractedly with the wood spirit rhino. Yu Kuan had already given Han Sen the wood spirit rhino. It was as whether they succeeded or not. Han Sen's personality was a little strange. If someone was trying to trick him, then he wouldn't let them get away with it no matter how bad the situation was. But for someone like Yu Kuan, who was willing to pay up front, Han Sen would help him no matter the cost. The wood spirit rhino was very beautiful. It gleamed like jade. Although it was made of wood, it was heavier than a lump of gold. The strange thing was, Han Sen was unable to discern the wood spirit rhino's power even though he was holding it. It seemed like an ordinary wood carving. It didn't look like a piece of butterfly-class wood. Han Sen didn't think Yu Kuan had given him a fake item, and that was because he had tested it. He tried his hardest to destroy the little statue, but it didn't buckle and break. That was verification of its deified status. But despite its resilience and beautifully polished surface, it didn't have a strong presence. Does that mean the wood spirit rhino doesn't have power? Is it merely the secrets within that hold its strength? If I can open and learn its secrets, can I gain access to the power myself? Han Sen kept wondering. He stared at the wood rhino spirit. The wood spirit rhino's carving appeared so alive, but there was no text or symbols on it. There was no semblance of a mind left behind. Han Sen prodded it a few times and used his Dongxian area and the purple-eye butterfly to examine it. He was unable to find out anything tricky about it. No matter how he viewed it, it was an ordinary miniature rhino carved out of wood through no extraordinary means. Aside from the material used, he could not discern anything special about the thing. As Han Sen was investigating the wood spirit rhino, Bauer had somehow managed to climb onto his back. Her head was next to Han Sen's shoulder, and she stared at the wood spirit rhino in his hands. "Daddy, what are you holding?" "This wooden statue has a secret in it, but I can't tell what it is," Han Sen said. "Let Bauer see it." Bauer jumped down onto Han Sen's chest and stole the wood spirit rhino out of his grip. Her little hand started to shake the wood spirit rhino. Then, suddenly, Han Sen noticed a yellow gleam like moonlight shining in the eyes of the wooden item. The light projected onto the wall, revealing some text. "Bauer, how did you do that?" Han Sen asked in delighted surprise. He had been watching her the whole time, but he didn't know how she had managed to summon the light coming out of the wood spirit rhino's eyes. Bauer had only touched the wood spirit rhino for a second or two, and Han Sen had watched the position of her hands at the time. He tried replicating the move she had made, but he was unable to make the statue light up. "It is so easy. Just pat it on the head," Bauer said as she patted the wood spirit rhino's head. With that, the light in its eyes suddenly disappeared. "Let me try." Han Sen reached his hand out and patted the rhino's head. There was nothing. Bauer reached out her hand and pressed the head, which made more light shoot out of the statue's eyes. Han Sen's inability to achieve the same results depressed him. He couldn't be bothered to figure out why Bauer was able to succeed where he had failed, though. Instead, he focused on recording the text the wood spirit rhino was displaying. It was a skill called heart connection. Han Sen seared the Geno art into his memory, but he didn't find the power mentioned by Yu Jing. Does this mean I can only get the power from the wood spirit rhino if I learn the Geno art? Han Sen guessed. Then, he tried researching the heart connection Geno art. Since the name sounded rather romantic, Han Sen expected the Geno art to be spiritual in nature. Perhaps it would have interpersonal properties. Han Sen soon discovered he was incorrect. The Geno art wasn't at all spiritual. It was actually rather violent. It was a Geno art that gathered up power, then released it in a sudden burst. It was like a rhino's ramming attack. Power was gathered like a charging rhino gaining momentum, then concentrated into the rhino's horn. But the side effects could be devastating. After an attack was unleashed, your body would become weak. Your power would be sucked dry, and it couldn't be used anymore. "This is a very dangerous Geno art," Han Sen complimented. Although the Geno art wasn't as destructive as Break 6 Skies, it had the precision of a steel needle. It could pierce through anything. It was a very powerful Geno art, but it was also very unique. Break 6 Skies had to be used at a distance unless the caster wanted to blow themselves up, but Heart Connection didn't have a range requirement. This Geno art could be a trump card. If I'm facing death, I can use this as one last attack to save myself. After Han Sen researched it, he tried practicing it. It wasn't difficult to learn the basics, but it would take a while to become skilled with the art. Han Sen gave Bauer many snacks, but she wasn't as happy as she had been. She didn't pay much attention to the snacks. Instead, she looked at Han Sen and told him, "Dad, I want to go to the very high. It is too dangerous there. Kids cannot visit them. You can stay and play with your aunties. You like Nightmare Beast, don't you? You can go play with him." Han Sen couldn't take Bauer with him to the very high. If his undercover activities were exposed, it would be difficult for him to escape, and he wouldn't want Bauer to get involved in that. "Dad, if you don't take me, I will go and find Mom," Bauer said with a blink. "Yes, you can spend time with Mom. That is good. And then go to kindergarten for a few days. Didn't you like that kindergarten teacher? What was her name?" "Oh, right, it was Lucy May."
Han Sen nodded.
Bauer smiled and said, "I'm not going to school. I am going to snitch to Mother." "Snitch about what?" Han Sen looked at Bauer with interest. He didn't think he had any dirty secrets to hide. Bauer lifted her hand and used her fingers to count. "Sister Suyi, Sister Isha, and that's Sister Exquisite." Bauer quickly realized she wasn't going to have enough fingers on one hand. She was about to continue when Han Sen stopped her and said, "There's nothing between me and any of those women. You can't threaten me with that. Owning the whole universe is pointless, and only your smile is eternal. I hope the next time I see you, I will be able to see you smile." Bauer replicated Han Sen's speech and tone. She looked innocent while she said it. "You know, I remember a lot. I think I will tell Mom all about this. She will be very touched and happy." After that, Bauer pulled out her little book. She opened it, and Han Sen saw that it was filled with childish scribbling. It was Bauer's writing, and they were all of the things Han Sen had said. Han Sen's forehead broke out in a cold sweat. Those words hadn't been inappropriate when they were spoken, but if they were read without any context, problems could arise. "Ahem, Bauer. Fathers and their daughters should communicate well with each other. There shouldn't be any conflict between us, right? Han Sen looked at Bauer and her little book. Bauer put away the little book and laughed. Yes. So, does that mean Bauer can follow Daddy to the very high? Mr. Zhuyu, Yukuin asked Han Sen to kill the Demon Abyss Beast King for him. They are going to the Demon Abyss. In the hall, a Sky Palace student was talking to a Sky Man in black armor. He had gray hair. Yukurin has practiced the Deep Abyss Demon spell. If he gets the Demon Abyss Beast King's deified gene, he can become deified. But the fact that he has managed to secure Han Sen's assistance is surprising, Zhuyu said emotionlessly. I have heard he gave Han Sen the Wood Spirit Rhino in exchange for his services. That is why Han Sen agreed to help, the Sky Palace student said. I see. Then, it makes sense, Zhuyu nodded. Mr. Zhuyu, Yukuin is still under suspicion. Should we prohibit Han Sen from helping him slay the Demon Abyss Beast King? Zhuyu shook his head. No. Han Sen is like a son to the leader. If he is willing to help Yukuin, Sky Palace leader must have given his approval. We will take the back seat and observe for a while. After a pause, Zhuyu said, Go and find Xia. Tell her to prepare. She will be going to the Demon Abyss on a trip with me. You are going to the Demon Abyss yourself? The student asked with shock. We do not understand our target yet. This will be a fine opportunity to learn more about Han Sen and Yukuin, Zhuyu said coldly. As Han Sen and Yukuin traveled toward Demon Abyss, Yukuin seemed very relaxed. Aside from Han Sen, he hadn't hired anyone else to help with the hunt. Han Sen had accepted payment for the job, so there was nothing else he could do. He had no choice but to help the man. After making his agreement with Yukuin, Han Sen had received a detailed synopsis of the Demon Abyss Beast King from Sky Palace leader. The file contained essentially the same information that Yukuin had already given him. Han Sen had a 70% chance of killing this beast. Of course, there was always the chance that the Demon Abyss Beast King would be stronger than the report stated. It could have evolved, too. So, Han Sen had to be very careful when calculating his odds. There was a lot to account for. The Demon Abyss was a giant hole in space with a massive star inside it. Space seemed to have collapsed under the weight of the enormous star, but then the star had reached an odd state of equilibrium instead of exploding as stars usually did under such conditions. The space hole contained many xenogeneics. Sky Palace students often enjoyed hunting there, but ordinary students wouldn't venture too far into the Demon Abyss. They could always hunt the low-level xenogeneics that remained on the outskirts, which would be far safer for the students than heading to the interior of the space hole. When the nearby Sky Palace students saw Han Sen and Yukuin approaching, they all came forward to bow. It was mainly a show of respect for Han's senator. They only called Yukuin uncle because formality required them to. Han Sen observed their faces, guessing they must have known about Yukuin and the allegations. Yukuin didn't pay any attention to their barely veiled disdain, though. With Han Sen, he pushed on deeper into the Demon Abyss. He avoided the larger groups of xenogeneics, obviously not wanting to waste time on low-rank creatures. Han Sen followed Yukuin through the Demon Abyss for 2 whole days before they reached their destination. There, they saw the Demon Abyss Beast King talked about in legends. There had been videos of the creature in the file that Han Sen had received, but there was a big difference between seeing a creature on a video and in real life. The sight of the beast was astounding. It had a scorpion body and a dragon head. Dragon wings spread from the creature's back, and it was covered in blue scales. The head had 8 pairs of draconic eyes. So, there were 16 eyes in total. Its body was 100 meters tall. Even the sight of the creature was horrible and disturbing. It was sleeping on one of the walls in the Demon Abyss. It was like a drowsing demon. Han Sen summoned his Peacock King's soul robe and his 6-core snake bow. Then, he turned to Yukuin. Let's put our plan into action. Sure, Yukuin said with a nod. He pulled out his blade. His weapon was a black ring blade that was close to 30 centimeters wide. It looked incredibly sharp. It was a very rare and weird weapon. Han Sen drew the string on his bow, but before he could release it, the Demon Abyss Beast King woke up. Its 16 eyes peered at Han Sen. Han Sen didn't hesitate. He fired at the Demon Abyss Beast King. sending an arrow imbued with rainbow light soaring through space. It flew straight toward one of the Demon Abyss Beast King's eyes. But just as the arrow approached, the Demon Abyss Beast King's eye opened like a black hole. The arrow disappeared into the black hole, then vanished. The Demon Abyss Beast King was not injured. The Demon Abyss Beast King screamed weirdly. It flapped its wings, making its body shine with a shimmering blue light. As it flew, the creature's wings looked strangely beautiful against the background of the Demon Abyss. A writhing substance chain emerged from the creature and came flying toward Han Sen. Han Sen drew his bow and fired again and again, sending many rainbow light arrows at the Demon Abyss Beast King. The Demon Abyss Beast King didn't care. Han Sen aimed at several different places across the creature's body, but wherever his arrows landed, a black hole manifested. The arrows flew into them and disappeared. None of them could deal a speck of damage to the Demon Abyss Beast King's body. Boom! The Demon Abyss Beast King opened its mouth. Suddenly, a blue flood poured out of it like a volcano erupting. It was headed straight for Han Sen. Han Sen's body flashed away quickly to avoid that flooding blue substance chain. He didn't retreat, though. He continued to fire his arrows, getting closer and closer to the Demon Abyss Beast King. Han Sen was like a surfer riding a tsunami that would end the world. The sky was full of blue energy, but it didn't hurt him. That primitive class Demon Abyss Beast King couldn't do anything to harm him. From some distance away, a sky man and woman watched the unfolding battle. "What powerful movements," the woman said, complimenting Han Sen's efforts. "His movement isn't the truly impressive thing," replied Zhuyu. He shook his head and said, "The remarkable thing is his ability to judge and analyze details. His body responds with perfect precision." "Precision?" Xia frowned. "You can see him falling back on the left. Before he fell back to the left, though, his body leaned right. And while leaning 70 degrees to the right, he fired 3 arrows. He did it all at the same time. He misled the Demon Abyss Beast King, tempting the creature into spitting its demon stream to the right. That, in turn, forced the Demon Abyss Beast King to go right. It gives him the space to go left. So, he has the time to move to a more advantageous position for his next attack. Details like that are in every single move. If this guy isn't just insanely OCD, then he is a born fighter," Zhuyu said. Xia looked at Zhuyu, suddenly unnerved. Han Sen's skills didn't look very special at all, but when she paid attention to the minuscule motions of Han Sen's body, it was just as Zhuyu had said. He was moving with amazing precision and planning. Xia had formed her impression of Han Sen when she saw him fight Exquisite. Those cruel, overbearing, and violent attacks were seared into Xia's analysis of who Han Sen was. She considered him a violent man, and so she hadn't taken the time to look for any finesse in his attacks. Now that she could see it clearly, she was shocked. The way he was fighting now was totally different than the techniques he had employed against Exquisite. It was hard to believe this fighting style belonged to the same person. Han Sen used his power to restrict the Demon Abyss Beast King, but his arrows didn't seem to inflict any damage on the creature. Black holes appeared and vanished all across the Demon Abyss Beast King's body. Whenever an arrow came close, it would be sucked into one of those black pits, keeping the damage from reaching the Demon Abyss Beast King. This was all within what Han Sen had expected, though. The Demon Abyss Beast King's power and capabilities had been detailed in the information he had been given. Han Sen never expected his arrows to be able to damage the Demon Abyss Beast King. He was simply buying enough time to get closer to the creature. Finally, Han Sen got close enough to the Demon Abyss Beast King. Han Sen spun his 6-core snake bow and used it like a knife. The razor-sharp string sliced into the Demon Abyss Beast King's scales, leaving deep wounds across its flesh. Just as the file said, the Demon Abyss Beast King's Demon Abyss power can consume energy, but it cannot turn away physical damage. Han Sen felt calm. The Demon Abyss Beast King became very angry after being struck. Its blue light raged with greater ferocity. But Han Sen attacked again and again with the 6-core snake bow, flitting around the Demon Abyss Beast King like a mosquito buzzing around a magnificent beast. No matter how loudly the Demon Abyss Beast King roared, it couldn't hit Han Sen. It then activated an area attack, But the fortitude of Han Sen's Peacock King's soul robe was enough to shrug off all the damage. The demon Abyss Beast King couldn't do anything against him. Yukuin stood to the side, doing absolutely nothing at all. He only restricted the demon Abyss Beast King a little bit. Han Sen continued fighting at close range, and the demon Abyss Beast King was being dealt more and more wounds. What a scary guy. This moveset and those knife skills resemble sky palaces under the sky. But who in our race ever practiced under the sky to such a level of proficiency? Xia asked with shock. Zuoyu was recording the fight between Han Sen and the demon Abyss Beast King. And as he continued to record it, he said, "Under the sky hasn't been complete for long. Not many students have practiced it, no? But there will eventually be more. This will be perfect learning material." Xia shook her head. This isn't something you can just watch and learn. You need to know how to use it, and executing a skill like this would be much harder than analyzing it. To be straight with you, only practitioners who have already mastered the skill could benefit from watching this. Most students wouldn't stand any chance of becoming as skilled as Han Sen, no matter how many times they watch this video. Maybe it wasn't a fluke that the very high test ranked him as an 11 armor talent. Zuoyu laughed and said, "Well, having this video will be better than nothing. I hope the sky can develop a few elites like Han Sr. I don't think we need to doubt Han Sen's capabilities any longer. A 9th-tier king is killing the demon Abyss Beast King. Although he does use 2 powerful treasures, Han Sen is definitely scary. If he is a spy, he is a great danger to Sky Palace. But right now, we still don't know where he came from," Xia said. "If he isn't a spy, then we have gotten very lucky. This is our department's responsibility. We must confirm his identity and political alignments," Zuoyu said. "That is true, but the civilization of the crystallizers is long gone. The few that remain are vagrant, interstellar travelers. We have been looking into Han Sen's past for some time, but after finding the Kate, we lost the trail. Plus, the Kate's planet has been ravaged by war in recent years. Many of the Kate people have lost their homes. There won't be much left for us to learn," Xia said. "But we still have to do it. This investigation is our responsibility, and the leader takes Han Sen very seriously. So, we have to find out. With his reputation, his influence within Sky Palace will continue to grow," Zuoyu said as he watched the demon Abyss Beast King battle Han Senator. The man's expression was grave. A sad wail rocked the whole of the demon abyss. The demon Abyss Beast King's head was chopped off by the 6-core snake bow. Demon blood cascaded down like rain. Xenogenic deified hunted. Demon Abyss Beast King. Xenogenic gene found. As this happened, an announcement sounded inside Han Sen's head. When he heard no mention of a beast soul, he looked disappointed. Yukurin began hauling the demon Abyss Beast King's body out of Demon Abyss. He couldn't hide it from the Sky Palace students. They could guess that Han Sen and Yukuin had killed the demon Abyss Beast King together. As everyone discussed Han Sen killing the deified Xenogenic, a student found a video showing Han Sen's performance in killing the demon Abyss Beast King. That video was quickly distributed all around Sky Palace. Brother Han is using Under the Sky. That belongs to the sky, doesn't it? Under the Sky can be that powerful? Of course it is strong. I heard Brother Han actually contributed to its modifications. It looks like I should start learning Under the Sky, then. Yes, we should. When Brother Han gets back to teaching, we should ask him. Many of the students in Sky Palace started to discuss Han Sen's use of Under the Sky, but after Han Sen saw the video himself, he could only frown. It looks like Sky Palace sent someone to watch me. Otherwise, there's no way someone could have filmed a video like that while we were fighting, Han Sen said. Han Sen kept thinking. He decided to agree to Sky Palace leader's request that he join the Very High for 4 years. When he returned, he would be given the constellation See All for himself. When Sky Palace leader heard Han Sen's decision, he didn't sound happy. He said grimly, "If you want to go, there is something annoying you must do before your departure. You cannot leave otherwise." What annoying thing? Han Sen frowned. He had thought that making the decision would be the difficult part. What had gone wrong now? Sky Palace leader squinted his eyes and said, "Exquisite wanted you to go, but you beat her and made her give up all hope. If you want to go, You need to make Exquisite select you once more. You will have to clean up this mess yourself. Han Sen's mouth hung open. After a while, he said, "What is this? If I had known, I wouldn't have beaten her so badly." Don't be so depressed. Beating her might not have been a bad thing. At least now she will look at you differently. And that means she will hold you in higher esteem. This way, you will have more freedom, Sky Palace leader said with a laugh. Can't you send someone to apologize on my behalf? Han Sen asked, trying not to cringe. He had beaten her badly and forced her to face painful realizations, all because he didn't want to go. Now he had changed his mind. After Han Sen thought about it some more, he realized he might have been a bit of a cretin. You are the one who beat her. It is now up to you to change her mind again. Otherwise, even if you somehow reach the very high on your own, only trouble would await you. Why not get it sorted before you go? Sky Palace leader patted him on the shoulder and went on to say, Don't mess this up. I have faith in you. Han Sen had no idea how to deal with this situation, but he wanted the constellation see. He had to do what Sky Palace leader was telling him to. What should I tell her? Am I just supposed to walk up and tell her that I want to join the very high despite everything that happened? I would feel so cheap after the fuss I made, Han Sen thought. He was on his way to the Sky's water house. He considered many different ways that he might approach the subject with Exquisite, but nothing he came up with seemed very good. When Han Sen arrived at the doorstep of the water house, he came face to face with Exquisite. She still looked rather pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I can't jump straight into this conversation. I just can't, Han Sen thought, suppressing a wry smile. What are you doing here? Are you looking for me? Exquisite asked Han Sen, her face completely expressionless. It seemed as if her failure in the fight hadn't affected her as much as he had expected. She seemed a little tired, but other than that, she looked the same as always. Well, I'm here to see if you have recovered yet. As soon as Han Sen said that, he wanted to slap himself. It sounded as if he was there to rub her loss in her face. I have almost healed. Exquisite didn't move. That's great. That's great. Although Han Sen wasn't eloquent on the best of days, he normally wasn't this awkward. This time, however, he was lost and fumbling. He didn't know how to say what he wanted to. Exquisite stared back at Han Sen, allowing an uncomfortable silence to settle between them. Han Sen opened his mouth a few times, but he couldn't summon the words. In the end, he said, Then, I will not disturb your recovery. After that, Han Sen got up and prepared to leave. He felt so nervous. He was unable to tell her what he wanted to. Then he heard someone giggle. Exquisite suddenly laughed. It shocked Han Senator he didn't know what she was laughing about, but she sure looked like a far finer woman when she did. Exquisite saw Han Sen's glance. She blushed for a moment, and then her face returned to its impassive expression. She met Han Sen's gaze and said, Sky Palace leader told me you have thought over the offer. You are now willing to follow me to the very high. Is that true? That old B***starred sold me out again. Han Sen swore in his head, suddenly looking even more uncomfortable. He didn't think Exquisite knew why he had come to visit her, but it seemed as if she was expecting him. And there he was, making a fool of himself. No wonder Exquisite had felt compelled to laugh. He could see the humor, though, and he knew that someday, he would look back on this and chuckle. At that point, Han Sen realized that being embarrassed wasn't doing him any good. He relaxed and nodded. Yes, I would like to go to the very high with you. I hope you don't mind accepting me, even after everything that has happened. Why did you change your mind? Exquisite asked, still not moving a muscle. There are many reasons, and I can't explain them all. What is most important for me, though, are the resources I will need. Han Sen's explanation was very vague. I'm going back to the very high in 2 days. You should prepare yourself, Exquisite said. Han Sen was shocked. He hadn't thought Exquisite would be so easy to talk to. She agreed to take him on very quickly. Han Sen opened his mouth, but again, he wasn't sure what to say to her. Since the start of this conversation, it had felt as if he had done nothing but say the wrong thing. So, Han Sen just decided to bid her farewell for the time being. When Han Sen left, the remote expression on Exquisite's face evaporated. She suddenly seemed very conflicted. There were only 2 days for Han Sen to prepare. Fortunately, there wasn't much for him to actually take care of. He only told the people closest to him that he would be leaving soon. When Han Sen told Lone Bamboo quietly asked, "You still decided on going? If I don't go, I won't be able to get my hands on the constellation C." "I must go," Han Sen said glumly, spreading his hands in a helpless gesture. "I hope to see you back here alive," Lone Bamboo ultimately said after a long pause. "Don't say it like you expect me to end up dead. I will be back in 4 years, Han Sen said with a laugh. "If you were going like a normal silkworm, then 4 years would be a short time. But you have an ulterior motive for signing up. Your trip to the very high will be dangerous, and your chance of surviving is low." Lone Bamboo clearly didn't know much about tact, but what he said was the truth. Looking for someone wasn't a crime, but lying about his intentions wouldn't be taken kindly by the very high. If he was found out, there was a high chance of severe consequences and punishments. But Han Sen was confident that there was a way to stop the very high from looking into his mind. If he hadn't been sure he would be okay, he wouldn't have risked going to the very high at all. After he got everything ready, Han Sen headed back to Black King City one last time. He said goodbye to the people there, then he went to see Sky Palace Leader. Sky Palace Leader said that he had a method that would keep the very high out of Han Sen's mind. Although Han Sen didn't place much faith in the idea, he did not mind hearing the leader's technique. 2 days went by in a flash. Han Sen brought Bauer and Exquisite to a ship that would take them away from Sky Palace. Exquisite plotted a course for their destination. Many creatures had been chosen by the Very High over the years, but even now, not many people knew where the Very High actually resided. According to what Sky Palace Leader said, the Very High xenogenic space could be moved. It wasn't in a fixed location. Unless someone had just been there, it would be impossible to determine where it was. It is a xenogenic space that can move. Han Sen didn't think it was all that special. He had already seen Sky Palace use the Chase Star Whip to move Narrow Moon. He wagered that if Sky Palace could do it, the superior Very High could very likely do the same. Moving a xenogenic space shouldn't have been too difficult for them. After the ship departed Sky Palace, Exquisite enabled autopilot for the ship to command itself. She pulled out a little leaf-sized ship. It hovered in the air, then began to swell. It became the size of an ordinary ship. "We are taking this ship to the Very High?" Han Sen and Bauer looked over the second ship with curiosity. "Only this ship can take us back," Exquisite said. She got onto that new ship and sat down in the front. Han Sen brought Bauer onto the small ship. After they sat down, Exquisite tapped the surface of the ship. The rowboat-shaped ship suddenly started flying. In one moment, the ship broke space and slipped into subspace. When Han Sen saw the Very High xenogenic space, he was awestruck. The Very High xenogenic space seemed to reside in subspace. Before this trip, Han Sen never even would have imagined that it was possible to maintain a landmass within subspace. Han Sen was flabbergasted. He was numbed by the vista. Do antimatter worlds really exist? Han Sen murmured to himself, gazing out the viewports of the ship. Actually, this place is a buffer zone between the real world and antimatter worlds. This isn't a true antimatter world. You can call it subspace, but we call it outer sky, Exquisite explained. Has this land always existed here, or was it moved here? Han Sen asked, looking at the heavenly landmass in front of him.